Chapter 1. The first cat to become famous in the Eastern Courtyard was not the Jiao family's black coal, nor was it the calm and steady De Pang, nor was it eunuch Huang. At that time, the four scumbags of the Eastern Courtyard were not well known, but most of the children in the courtyard knew that there was a black cat sheriff in their courtyard. One day, a child who had just finished an art interest group class returned to the courtyard and saw an 8-month-old sheriff running past him with a mouse in its mouth. When he returned home, the child was so excited that he didn't even have time to eat. He fully displayed his artistic talent. He took out a crayon and drew a picture of Black Cat Sheriff bravely catching a thief. Later on, this picture was even taken to a competition. After that, no matter if it was the Eastern Courtyard or the Western Courtyard, or even the other elementary schools in the city, people all knew that there was a Black Cat Sheriff in the Eastern Courtyard of Tsinghua University. In the language class, students had to write about cats. More than half of the children who did not have a cat at home wrote about the sheriff. At that time, the teachers in the affiliated elementary school just laughed and thought that the children loved the Black Cat Sheriff because of the cartoons, so they did not pay too much attention to the cat. Many years later, the brave Black Cat Sheriff, that had been praised by many children, became the favorite cat in Tsinghua University. Its picture was all over the country, and a few of the language teachers even gathered in the office to talk about it for an entire afternoon. In the hearts of the children and adults, the Black Cat Sheriff was still as brave as ever. Now, many children had grown from little toddlers to middle school students, and some of the elementary school students had already gone to university. But when it came to the cats in the courtyard at home, many people still remembered the existence of the Black Cat Sheriff, and it often made its presence known in the courtyard. 10 years had passed and it was still the same. However, in the eyes of others, it had a different impression. People who were familiar with the sheriff knew that this cat had two characteristics. One was that it was very aggressive and did not care about its life when it fought. Wherever it was put down, it would get up and recuperate before running back to fight. The other was that it had a special gift for language and it was very dog-like. There was a rumor that the sheriff's owner had raised it as a dog since it was young. Regarding this, the sheriff's owner had to cry out for justice. The sheriff was born with a gift for languages. He had been curious about strange sounds since he was young, such as the sound of a washing machine, a TV set, musical instruments, and the sounds of other species other than cats. By the time Sheriff's owner noticed it, Sheriff was already playing a pickup game with the little Pekingese downstairs. He was also becoming more and more proficient with his dog accent. Even Professor Jiao's black cat, who was recognized as the smartest in the entire courtyard, could not learn such an innate skill. Someone in the medical field had once said that keeping cats and dogs could lower blood pressure and lower the chances of heart disease. The strongest proof of this was De Pang and Little Flower. Looking at the old lady who kept De Pang, and then looking at old Li who took Little Flower out for a leisurely walk every day, they all proved that this was indeed true. But the sheriff's owner didn't feel that way. When Sheriff was young, he was basically forced to stay at home. At that time, he didn't have the ability to climb through windows and high walls. Therefore, the things in the house were the first to be harmed. Sheriff's owner would see all kinds of bad things when he returned home every day. After he figured out his experience, the family would unplug the TV before they left, close the washing machine, don't put anything on the fridge, or just put some paper products, and lock the wardrobe. Sheriff's mental state was always fluctuating between active and abnormally active. Other than sleeping and eating time, he always had to do something to satisfy his overly exuberant curiosity. He would touch anything that humans used, and he was also curious about things that humans didn't use. Once, he was especially curious about irons. After his paw was burned by the iron once, he learned his lesson. However, he only retracted his paw. Every time Sheriff's cat mother ironed clothes, he would still curiously squat at the side and watch. When Sheriff gradually grew up, he wanted to go out into the wild. He couldn't be locked up, but the elders in the family didn't like to lock up cats. Their generation didn't care much about raising cats, and they were very casual. After Sheriff became familiar with the yard, he liked to provoke small dogs like Chihuahuas or small Pekingese in the yard. Then he would jump to a high place and bark at the dogs that were angered by him. When he was tired of barking, he would squat down and lick his paw. He was interested in watching the dogs bark angrily below, but they couldn't do anything to him. Then he would close his eyes and prepare to sleep. Every time the sheriff's elders saw him flirting around, they would happily slap their thighs and say, "Hey, I just like how cocky he is." Someone once suggested bringing Sheriff for surgery just like Huang. After the surgery, Huang became much more obedient and less worrisome. Unfortunately, the sheriff's family couldn't agree, and in the end, nothing was done. As for Sheriff himself, he didn't have anything to worry about. At home, he had someone to feed him on time. When he was outside, he could find some natural protein to snack on. He could also find other cats to exercise. Although Sheriff always liked to provoke other cats and dogs in the yard, including Little Flower and Yo Zhuang Zhuang, there were two cats that he didn't want to provoke. One was Depang and the other was Black Charcoal. He couldn't beat Depang, and provoking Depang was simply asking for trouble. If he really angered Depang, he wouldn't be able to get anything out of it. As for Depang, he couldn't beat him. Also, Black Charcoal had saved him before. Besides, Black Charcoal had a bad temper. Sheriff would get beaten up if he tried to use his paws. Sheriff liked the four of them to act together. They had something to play with, and they didn't have to worry about being bullied by other cats and dogs. Later, a yellow and white cat came to the yard. Some people called it Candy Peanut. Sheriff fought with it once but didn't win. Later, Black Charcoal took it to patrol the streets with Candy Peanut to pick fights. Sheriff liked it, so in the beginning, whenever he heard Candy Peanut barking in the yard, he would be more active than Black Charcoal. But later, Black Charcoal often disappeared. Sheriff followed Candy Peanut out a few times, but he didn't follow it anymore. Candy Peanut grew stronger and stronger and became better at fighting. Whenever Candy Peanut went out, other cats would avoid it. Sheriff couldn't find one to spar with, so he was very unhappy. So, when Candy Peanut came to the yard to call for its friends, Sheriff pretended that he didn't hear it. Then, after Candy Peanut left, he would go out to fight with other cats or tease the little Pekingese and Chihuahuas in the yard. 10 years later, Sheriff didn't tease puppies as much as before, but he still couldn't stay idle. He spent half of his time in the yard and half of his time in the small garden. His cat friends were in the yard and his two dog friends were in the small garden. For Sheriff, every day was full of fun. Even if there wasn't any fun, he could still create fun. One day in June, the atmosphere in the yard was very strange. All the owners were nervous, fearing that their cats would be kidnapped. Huang was locked up at home and there were no other cats in the yard. Today, the sheriff managed to sneak out of the yard through a gap. She hadn't seen Charcoal for 3 days in a row. When she walked past the building, she cried out twice at the top of her lungs. When she raised her head to look, she didn't see a black cat's head peeking out from the balcony on the 5th floor. Only Fatty, who was squatting on the balcony on the 1st floor, lifted his eyelids and swept a glance in her direction. Seeing that Depang didn't want to move and that he couldn't call his other friends, Sheriff could only go out to have fun. After wandering around the woods in the yard, rolling a few times in the grass and sharpening his claws, Sheriff saw a familiar object. Not far from him, there was a brown object on a short branch. At this time, one by one, small things were crawling out of it. The brown object on the branch was a praying mantis egg. At this time, small praying mantids that were almost the color of flesh were crawling out of the egg. Relatively speaking, these praying mantis eggs hatched a little late. In some places on the campus they hatched in May. Sheriff had seen these small things before. Not long ago he saw them in the small garden. Old Man Lon didn't let him harm these small things. So Sheriff, who had nothing to do, squatted in front of the short branch, tilted his head and curiously looked at the hatched praying mantids. He didn't move his claws, just looked, and the tip of his tail swayed back and forth. After watching for a long time, most of the small praying mantids had hatched. Sheriff stretched out his forearm, yawned, and raised his paw to lick it. Suddenly he found a small praying mantis on his paw climbing up his forearm. So, Sheriff put aside the idea of licking his paw for the time being. Instead, he suddenly jumped up and did a few difficult somersaults in the air, jumping left and right, pouncing forward and rolling back. 2 students who came to the east yard to visit the teachers passed by. The person in the singlet pointed at Sheriff and said to his companion, "Look, the school pet is acting crazy again." The other person glanced at him, probably found something fun. The newly hatched praying mantids were too small, so they didn't notice them at all. That's hard to say. Last week I saw it jumping on the lawn in front of our school. In order to study it, I even squatted beside it and held up my phone to take pictures for nearly half an hour. I still can't figure out why it's playing so happily. Is it playing with you? Who knows? I don't understand the world of lunatics. Anyway, now that I think about it, I feel that I did something stupid. Furthermore, I was seen by the dean. The student in the singlet had a bitter expression on his face, as if he had done something that was too late for regrets. Did the dean talk to you about life? No. That's good. The old man just shook his head with his hands behind his back and said, "One is crazy while the other is crazy." Damn, I felt like sh*ting myself at that time. The two students didn't go closer to take a look. They felt that it was probably the same as a few days ago. They didn't know what the school pet was doing, so mortals like them didn't want to find out. Sheriff didn't know at all that he had caused trouble for others. He was now immersed in his own world, having a good time. What made Sheriff stop was a dog's bark. After hearing the dog's bark, Sheriff immediately shifted his attention and looked towards the iron gate of the courtyard that had been closed all this time. There was a tabby dog standing by the gate. After barking at Sheriff, the tabby dog looked towards Building B and looked around. It didn't see the black cat, so it turned its attention back. Sheriff ran over and got out of the iron gate. He ran towards the small flower garden with the tabby dog, Shunzi. Every 2 steps he ran, he fluttered the flowers next to him and rubbed against the grass twice. When he was rubbing his back against the grass with his belly facing up, Sheriff swept his gaze across the courtyard bathed in sunlight. The walls of the old residential buildings were covered with ivy. His gaze stopped at the balcony of the 5th floor of Building B for a few seconds. There were many cats in the courtyard. They disappeared and disappeared forever. Even if he wanted to fight, he couldn't find them. What about black charcoal? Without black charcoal, the 3 cats didn't move together anymore. Chapter 2. In many people's eyes, Depang was a quiet dragonly that was a little stronger and fatter than the other cats in the compound. Few people knew that Depang was actually small and thin when it was young. Before Depang was raised, the old lady with gray hair lived alone. Although her son had always wanted to take the old lady over, the old lady still preferred the compound where she had lived for decades and refused her son's suggestion to hire a nanny. One day the old lady saw someone raising a cat in the compound and had the idea of raising a cat. She was invited back to her hometown to attend a junior's wedding, so she planned to go back to her hometown and pick a kitten to bring back. She still preferred cats from her hometown. The old lady's hometown was in the province, not too far from the city. Every week, people from her hometown would come to the provincial capital to do business and transport goods. Naturally, they would also visit the old lady. After all, some of them could do business in the provincial capital safely because of the old lady's connections, so they would definitely come to visit during the holidays. Coincidentally, the female cat of one of the visitors had given birth. When he heard that the old lady wanted to catch a cat from her hometown, he immediately agreed. The old lady took the car arranged by her son back to her hometown. When she arrived, she found out that there would be a few juniors holding weddings in the next month or so. Although they were not related by blood, the relationship between the older generation was there. Some people warmly urged her to stay. The old lady also felt that it was too troublesome to go back and forth from her hometown, so she decided to stay in her hometown for a month or 2 before going back to the provincial capital. After all, many of her peers were old and might pass away at any time. She wanted to talk more while her bones were still strong. During this time, the old lady went to choose a cat. In fact, when the old lady went over, the litter of kittens were already more than a month old. They were strong and had beautiful fur colors. They had already been booked, but the family did not tell the old lady. They only let the old lady choose which one she liked. For that family, they often went to the provincial capital to transport goods, so they definitely had to build a good relationship with the old lady. Therefore, compared to other people in the village, they wanted to please the old lady more, as long as the old lady was satisfied with the cat she chose. As for other people who had already come to order cats, they didn't care much. It was just a cat. They would apologize and drink some wine and this matter would be over. However, the family did not expect the old lady to look at the litter of kittens and finally pick the smallest one. This is the last one to be born. Usually it can't compete with other kittens for food. It was born small and didn't eat as much as other kittens. This month it's even more obvious. The man stroked the cat's fur to comfort her. His cat was an old cat and was familiar with people. She didn't run away at the sight of people like other cats. Even when neighbors came to see their kittens, she didn't care much. Now that she saw an unfamiliar old lady, she was a little alert and uneasy. After the owner stroked her fur, she calmed down again. That's the one. I liked it at first glance, the old lady said as she pointed at the obviously smaller kitten that was squeezed into the corner by its siblings. She picked a cat based on fate, and once she liked it, she decided on it. The master wanted to persuade her, but seeing that the old lady had made up her mind, he didn't say anything more. 4 kittens had already been ordered in this litter. He planned to keep one for himself. As for the smallest one, he planned to sell it when it grew up, but he didn't expect the old lady to take a fancy to it. A week later, the family sent the cat to the old lady. The kitten was almost 2 months old. In the past few days, people had gone to pick up cats one after another. There were only 2 kittens left in the litter. Now that the smallest one was sent over, there was only one left in the litter. As for naming, the villagers rarely thought of names for cats, so they didn't give much advice in this regard. The old lady saw that the kitten was thin and small, so she named it Depang. She hoped that the kitten would grow up bigger and stronger in the future. Depang. The old lady held Depang with both hands and shouted the name a few times. Fatty, who was only 2 months old, was being held in the palm of her hand. His shriveled little body trembled as he stared pitifully at the old lady in front of him. His meowing was not loud, and compared to the other kittens he seemed much weaker. After returning to the provincial capital, Depang grew in size and wasn't as shriveled as it was when it was young. Every month the old lady brought it to live in the military compound, and it was exposed to more new things. Depang was very clingy to the old lady. It didn't need to be tied up with a leash, and it didn't run around the house as energetically as the other cats, which was rare among cats. However, even though Depang was much quieter than the other cats, it was still a cat. Every cat had to pay a price for their actions, and Depang's price was an indissoluble bond with instant noodles. Once, the old lady brought Depang to live with her son again. The old lady was pulled out by a friend for a chat, and Depang was left alone in the house. It walked around the house, then climbed along the legs of the table and looked at the things on the table. There weren't many things on the table. Other than a cup, there was only a bag of instant noodles. Depang stared at the bag of instant noodles for half a minute, and couldn't help but raise its paw to touch it. The sound made by the outer packaging of the instant noodles made Depang very curious. Just touching it wasn't enough to satisfy its curiosity, so it walked up and stepped on it a few times. Ka. A sound that was different from the sound of the instant noodle packaging made Fatty pause for a moment. After that, he started to stomp even more joyfully. Although the ka sound could not be heard every time, it could be heard after a few times. So, when Depang's cat father entered the house, he saw Depang squatting on the instant noodles, its 2 front paws still stepping on the edge of the instant noodles. The sound of the noodles being stepped on could be heard constantly. When Depang's cat father opened the instant noodles, he found that there were a lot of crumbs on the edge of the flatbread. After all, Depang wasn't that heavy, so the flatbread was still in good condition, but there were a lot of small crumbs on the edge. The next day, Depang's cat father looked at the clean table before going out. He went back into the house and took out a bag of instant noodles from the cardboard box in the corner. He shook it to hear how many crumbs there were in it, and then put the instant noodles on the table in the same position as yesterday. When he came back in the afternoon, he saw Depang squatting on the instant noodles and taking a nap. He carried Depang away, picked up the bag of instant noodles and shook it. Judging by the sound, there were a lot more crumbs than when he took it out in the morning. Depang, who was still a little confused after being carried away, looked at the person in front of it and called out in confusion. Depang's cat father let go of the instant noodles, bent his legs, and lowered his body so that his eyes were level with Depang. "You like to play with instant noodles, right?" Depang yawned. "Okay, you'll have to squat in the future." So, whenever Depang was brought here by the old lady, it would have to squat for a while on instant noodles, and then it would develop to squat as punishment if it did something wrong. There were a few retired military dogs in the yard, and people would usually go over to give them some simple training. The retired military dogs were no longer in peak condition, and these simple training were just for them to move around. Unexpectedly, Depang's cat father took Depang there on a whim. Fortunately, those military dogs were very obedient and didn't show any aggression towards Depang. Depang wasn't afraid either. It didn't know if it was too dense or it was originally brave, but after a few days it started to play with those dogs. Later, every time Depang was brought over, it would play with those military dogs. To it, it was playing, but in fact, it was training with those military dogs. Because of the cat's natural advantages, it was very easy for it to overcome obstacles. No wonder it treated it as playing from the beginning. Seeing that Depang's ability to accept things was so strong, its cat father began to have other ideas. He found someone to teach Depang, and didn't forcibly change Depang's character. He just taught Depang to stay away from some dangerous things such as mousetraps, cat cages, and so on. Depang couldn't do many training tasks as well as those military dogs, and sometimes it caused trouble. Originally, the military dogs' training tasks were going well, but because of Depang's mistakes, the dog's pace was disrupted. Fortunately, it didn't cause trouble and it didn't run around. Even if it ran, it wouldn't run far. After disappearing for a while, it would find a high ground and start calling people. Other people also didn't say anything for the sake of its cat father. Cats weren't as obedient as dogs, and the people who trained the military dogs weren't as strict with them as the military dogs were. Many times, Depang squatted on the side and watched the military dogs train or ran along the side. Other people didn't think it was a big deal. Anyway, this cat was just there to watch. It was just running along. If it did something wrong, no one would hit it, so it was very easy. But the old lady didn't. Seeing Depang running and jumping with those military dogs, the old lady felt distressed. In the old lady's heart, military training was very tiring, and the military dogs were also tired. Thinking about it this way, her Depang must be tired too. She couldn't stop Depang from running, so she could only put in more effort to eat. Therefore, even though the amount of exercise was not small, Depang's body was still filled up. She took it to the vet for examination, but the vet couldn't tell the reason. They only said that it was probably the same as humans, eating the same food and exercising the same amount. It was just that there were differences in weight and weight. Depang had been taught by its cat father to play Morse code games since it was young. It could skillfully play some simple Morse code games, just as it could understand the short instructions during training. It could repeat the instructions taught. Of course, this couldn't be compared to black charcoal in general. Depang couldn't accept the more profound Morse code games. After all, it wasn't as special as those two games. Even so, in the eyes of many people, Depang was already an elite cat. However, as the days passed, Depang became more and more plump, and in the eyes of others, it was less of an elite. Which family's elite would be a fat cat? In the first year that Depang was adopted by the old lady brought her family home to worship their ancestors during Chinese New Year. She also brought Depang along. On the night that they returned to the village, Depang fought with two cats in the village who had stolen salted fish from their old house. It was 1 against 2, and the two cats kept screaming as they chased after it. The two cats didn't dare to walk in front of Depang's old house for a short period of time. Even when the old lady brought Depang away from the old house, the two cats only carefully wandered around in the distance after 2 weeks. The family that gave the cat to Depang was puzzled when they saw it. It used to be the smallest and weakest cat in the litter. How did it become the strongest? It was even stronger than its brothers and sisters. Looking at how fierce it was during the fight 2 days ago, and thinking about how old Wang's cat at the village entrance screamed when it was pressed to the ground and bitten, maybe it was because Depang was robbed of its food by its brothers and sisters when it grew up, but it was very protective of its food when it grew up. In the eastern courtyard, the sheriff and Huang never robbed Depang of its food. They couldn't beat it and they didn't dare to. One time, a cat from the western courtyard came over. While the balcony door was open, Depang followed the other 3 cats out for a walk. It followed the smell and sneaked in to steal food. It was caught red-handed by Depang when it came back. Depang, who was walking home slowly, suddenly became Spartan. With a speed that didn't match its fat body, it rushed over to the cat and bit it on the ground. The cat screamed in pain. The cat struggled to get out of the door with injuries, and a tuft of hair on its ear was bitten off. Depang didn't give up. It chased it out of the eastern courtyard, and along the way, it pressed down on the cat and bit it a few more times. Since then, the cat didn't even enter the eastern courtyard. When it walked around the campus, it avoided Depang like the plague. Although it was protective of its food, Depang didn't eat indiscriminately. It rarely ate food given to it by others. Even if it was someone it knew in the courtyard, it might not give face. In general, although Depang wasn't particularly friendly to other animals, it wouldn't take the initiative to attack them. It would only explode when it was robbed of its food or when it encountered a dangerous object. It usually looked harmless. At first glance, it looked like a fluffy and docile cat doll. Some people also said that Depang wasn't lively. With the other cats in the courtyard in front of it, Depang looked like a slow little old man. It was much quieter than Huang. But for the old man, this was considered a good thing. It was very easy to worry about. The balcony on the first floor of Building B in the eastern courtyard had cement railings. Probably because it was on the first floor, Depang's balcony railings were wider than those of the people upstairs. Usually there were 2 pots of flowers. Sometimes the old lady would take out the insoles and put them there to dry. However, there was a spot on the railings reserved for Depang. Whether it was squatting on the balcony or on the railings, Depang always liked to squat in a fixed spot. Someone once joked with the old lady, "Does your family's Depang have obsessive-compulsive disorder?" The old lady smiled but didn't say anything. Like a trained soldier, Depang guarded the same spot on the balcony at the same time every day. It squinted its eyes and looked a little confused and absent-minded. But from time to time, its ears moved because of subtle sounds, indicating that it was very alert. The people in the courtyard seemed to be used to seeing the fat dragon squatting there quietly at a certain time. The children who used to walk in front of the building with their small school bags and sang, "The sun shines in the sky," had changed to riding bicycles in a hurry. Or they had gone out of the house to fight for their future. But every time they went home and passed by the building, they would habitually look at the balcony on the first floor and say to their friends next to them, "Look, that's Depang. It's been squatting there since I was young." The summer wind blew, rustling the leaves. The old lady was making cold cakes in the kitchen. She planned to bring them to her son's place tomorrow. Her grandson had called yesterday to say that he wanted to eat some. Depang, who had just finished its meal, walked out of the room with a smirk on its face. When it walked to the balcony, Depang looked at a secluded corner of the balcony. It didn't find the key, so it retracted its gaze and walked a few steps to the balcony. It slowly licked its paws and wiped its face. Then it jumped onto the railing and squatted at its fixed spot, closing its eyes to take a nap. There were trees in front of the building and the leaves blocked the hot sun. Depang squatted there so it wasn't too hot. While it was squatting, Depang's ears twitched. A chihuahua was chasing after the sheriff. The sheriff didn't look at Depang. It ran past the building and disappeared in the blink of an eye. It was going to take shelter at Xiaohua's place. The chihuahua, who didn't manage to catch the cat, looked around and saw Depang squatting on the balcony railing. It immediately bared its teeth and barked. Woof, 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 woof. The puppies that were provoked by the sheriff were probably hostile toward cats. When they saw Depang squatting on the balcony, they started barking at it. Unfortunately, the balcony was too high, and the chihuahua couldn't reach it no matter how hard it tried. It could only bark. There was nothing else it could do. Depang opened its eyes a little and looked down at the chihuahua. "If the enemy doesn't move, I won't move. If the enemy moves, I'll be as steady as Mount Tai." Depang didn't get angry or bark. He just stared at the chihuahua in silence. The chihuahua's barking gradually became softer. It retreated, then retreated again. It tried to look fierce, but it was cowardly at heart. Then it left dejectedly. Chapter 3. Look, that cat looks so majestic. Really, it looks like a little tiger. Several students who were passing by the flower bed to visit the teachers in the eastern courtyard saw the cat on the flower bed and couldn't help but take out their phones to take a few photos. On the edge of a flower bed about half a meter above the ground, a yellow cat with stripes on its body was there. It wasn't thin or weak. At that moment, the cat was walking along the edge of the flower bed with its tail up. His eyes were not wide open and looked a little careless and casual. His pupils were narrowed into shuttles because of the light, and his gaze looked very sharp. Coupled with the standard arrogant steps of a feline, he gave off a good overall impression. It was no wonder that some students' first impression of him was that he was impressive. However, the students soon realized that their first impression of the cat was wrong. The yellow cat looked straight ahead and did not pay attention to the wall of the flower bed under its feet. When it walked to the edge, it did not seem to have any intention of stopping or jumping. It stepped on air and fell down. Before it could adjust its landing position, it rolled on the grass pathetically. The students were speechless. After the students left, Huang had enough rolling and rubbing on the grass. It chose a suitable place, shook off the grass on its body, yawned, and lay there to prepare for sleep. It wasn't as picky about where it slept as Depang. As long as it was in the eastern courtyard, it could sleep peacefully in any corner. In the past, Huang liked to come out early in the morning and walk around. Then it would go out of the courtyard with its 3 friends and pass by the eastern courtyard supermarket. It would solve its metabolic problems at the entrance of the supermarket that was under renovation. Its favorite thing was to poop in the sand outside the eastern courtyard supermarket. After it was done, it would go to the small forest not far away to sharpen its claws and find a suitable place to squat. It would watch the reaction of the cement workers when they shoveled the sand with a big shovel. In the past, in many people's eyes, Huang wasn't a good cat because of its messy poop. Even the best quality cat litter might not be able to change a cat's peeing habits. When Huang was locked up at home, even if it was placed in a cat litter box, it would still pee all over the outside of the litter box. Therefore, Huang was the only cat in the eastern courtyard who used a 2-tiered litter box. When they were outside, Huang was even happier. Back then, the smell of that guy's urine could be smelled in many places in the East family compound. However, that guy was obviously the type who would not change no matter how many times he was taught. No matter how many times he was beaten, he did not learn his lesson. When it was 8 months old, Huang was finally taken to the pet center for a complete castration operation. Since then, its bad habits had changed a lot and it didn't poop as much. The only thing was that it still liked to poop in the sand at the Dongyuan supermarket. Therefore, many of the bad habits of cats could not be changed even with surgery. Huang didn't run outside to howl like Sheriff and the others, but Huang liked to make its presence known. After being locked up at home for a long time, it would run around the residential building howling once it was let out, and then go out to do some activities. Huang didn't run far by itself. It was basically active in the eastern courtyard. Its ability to remember directions wasn't as good as the other cats. To put it simply, it had a bad sense of direction. Plus, it wasn't very brave, so it basically stayed in the courtyard. However, if the other 3 cats went out and acted together, it would also go out and join in the fun. Sometimes it would squat in the trees to watch the fun, sometimes it would squat in the wooden chairs to take a nap in the sun, and sometimes it would go to the woods to catch birds and play with insects. Of course, it had also fought with the other cats in the western courtyard. Although Huang had a lot of bad habits, it had the best temper among the 4 cats. It wasn't like Black Charcoal, who ran all day without a trace. It wasn't like Sheriff, who was aggressive and annoying everywhere. It also wasn't like Depang, who was like a little old man. Huang was the opposite of Depang. Depang looked like it was easy to get along with, but it was actually a hard nut to crack. Huang looked like a serious elite, but it was actually a fool on the inside. It was also more friendly to people and other animals. In the courtyard, Xiaohua and Niu Zhuangzhuang often played with Huang on the grass when they were young. When it was at home, it was also clingy. When no one was paying attention to it, it would make its presence known. When you were watching TV, it would block the TV. When you were reading, it would squeeze over to lie on the book. When its cat mother was knitting, it would go over to grab the ball of wool. Some of the children in the courtyard liked to call Huang Eunuch Huang. One time, when a naughty child heard his parents talking about Huang, he said, "Huang is a little eunuch." Later on, he often called Huang Little Eunuch or Eunuch Huang with the other children in the courtyard. Huang was used to it and knew that it was being called, but it didn't care. It didn't understand the meaning of these words. As long as the children didn't pull its whiskers or tail, it was always more tolerant. Even if the children pinched its face and pulled it to the sides, as long as it didn't hurt too much, it was too lazy to resist and let the children play. Sometimes, when some people in the courtyard saw Huang lying on the grass and basking in the sun, they couldn't help but rub it on the grass a few times as if it was dough. Many people who knew about Huang's amiable personality said that it was because Huang had undergone castration surgery, so its personality was a bit soft. However, if those people had seen Huang fight with the other 3 cats, they would know that this guy was actually quite manly and had the courage to fight. Probably because it didn't have the rippling thoughts of other cats who hadn't been castrated, Huang saved a lot of effort. It still had some meat on its body. Although it wasn't like Depang's, it was still a lot thicker than Sheriff's. Combined with its deceptive appearance, it looked quite impressive. As it grew older, even if it was still an idiot, Huang would learn a lot of things. It would understand some simple principles and gradually change some bad habits. However, Huang never understood why when the 4 of them were basking in the sun on the grass beside the forest, Black Charcoal always liked to find some stones to stuff into its claws until its folded arms were full. Why was this? The wind in June was a bit arrogant. It blew Huang's fur backwards and woke up the sleepy Huang. Squinting its eyes and yawning, Huang got up and jumped onto the flower bed next to it. It looked at the already slanted sunlight and the green grassland in front of it. The grassland was a bit big and empty. Meow! Huang stood by the flower bed and meowed a few times in the direction of the grassland. The people who went to pick up the children from kindergarten were already used to this cat that liked to meow a few times before doing anything, so they didn't care. However, a child who was being led by the cat walked over and stared at Huang. Huang and the child looked at each other for a few seconds. The smell was quite familiar, so it wasn't afraid. It stretched and lay down again, still holding its claws like it did in winter. After a few more seconds, Huang realized that it was a bit hot. Just as it was about to stretch and lie down, it suddenly realized that the child in front of it moved. The child with a small backpack dug around in his pocket and took out a walnut and put it in front of Huang. He paused, stretched out his finger and poked the walnut between Huang's 2 front claws, then ran back to the parent who was waiting a few steps away. "What is Huang doing?" the parent joked. The little kid grinned. "Huang is incubating eggs." There were 2 more chapters and there were Easter eggs at the end of both chapters. They were released during the New Year's holiday. Chapter 4. General had been with Professor Tan since he was still a student. As the tall, rich, and handsome man among the birds, General had always been a character that everyone loved, old and young alike. Professor Tan came from a scholarly family. His father, old Professor Tan, was very influential in his field. Otherwise, Professor Tan would not have been able to get his hands on a purple-blue macaw at such a young age, and would often take General to various nature reserves for sightseeing. As a pet bird, General was treated very well. Macaws lived relatively long lives. Among the people Professor Tan knew, many of them were in their 20s and 30s and were still healthy. When Professor Tan went to an ecological reserve in the south, he saw a macaw in its 60s. Every day when the old professor who raised it took a walk with the radio, it would repeat the voice of the announcer on the radio. Later, when Professor Tan taught at Tsinghua University, General also stayed with him at the East Side family compound of Tsinghua University for a few days every year. As it grew older, General's intelligence had been increasing. In addition, General was smarter than other macaws of its kind, so its understanding and use of human language were beyond many people's imagination. In terms of eloquence, the myna, brother wasp, and other macaws might not be as eloquent as the macaw. As the leader of the eloquent species, General was considered to have a foul mouth. The first 5-word sentence that Professor Chin's red-green macaw had learned was learn and practice. The first 5-word sentence that Professor Chin had learned was, look at you. It was sonorous and powerful. It was obvious that General was talented in the art of foul mouth. Professor Tan, who was still a student at that time, was so angry that he wanted to strangle General and ask, why can't you learn better? In the morning, the red-green macaw at old Professor Tan's house would say, good morning to old Professor Tan, who had just woken up, and General would crow at old Professor Tan, who was still lying in bed. At that time, there was a family in Professor Chin's neighborhood who was sent a few chickens by their relatives. Although they didn't want to raise them, they didn't slaughter them all at once. They put them on the balcony and made a simple cage. Among them there was a rooster. That rooster crowed every morning. General also learned from this rooster. However, the crow that the General learned was a little out of place. In Professor Tan's words, it was like a rooster that had been castrated but not completely castrated. It was a little hysterical and breathless. It was uncomfortable to listen to. No matter how good a dream was, it would be a nightmare, let alone continue to sleep. Later on, that family slaughtered all the chickens and there were no more crows in the neighborhood. In addition, the Tan family intentionally went out to isolate the General from the chickens. Only then did the General change his bad habit. Otherwise, after he went to Tsinghua University, the people in the eastern courtyard would be the ones to suffer. General had a lot of hobbies. One of the more prominent ones was that it liked to bite cat ears. This was probably related to the fact that it was bullied by cats when it was young. Another habit that people both loved and hated was singing. When Professor Tan was still a student, he didn't have much time to take care of General. Therefore, General spent most of its time with old Professor Tan and his wife. The two of them especially liked to teach it how to sing. They taught it songs that were very characteristic of that era. They even liked to teach it operas. Even though Professor Tan had been teaching at Tsinghua University for many years, General still preferred songs from that era. It was probably because it couldn't understand the lyrics of many pop songs nowadays and couldn't appreciate the rhythm. Of course, Professor Tan also rarely taught it rap songs. When General went to the south to celebrate Chinese New Year, he came into contact with the Tan family's aunts. Naturally, they didn't teach it many 21st century pop songs. As for the things that General hated, there were many. Among the birds, the ones that it hated were magpies and cuckoos. It didn't know why the people around it liked ugly creatures like magpies. They didn't know how to sing or do crosstalk. Why did the people in the courtyard smile every time they saw magpies? As for cuckoos, which were given a lot of mythical features by people, General hated them even more. It especially hated the parasitic behavior of some cuckoos. When General was released, if it saw cuckoos laying eggs in other birds' nests and kicking the original eggs or chicks out of the nest, General would chase after them and bite them. There was once when General was too impulsive and flew too fast. The forest was too dense and it didn't react in time. General crashed into a tree and its wings were scratched by a branch. It was locked up at home by Professor Tan for a few months. This hatred deepened. In the first few years in the eastern courtyard, General would bully the cats in the courtyard as soon as it was released. With its body size and fighting ability, it wasn't afraid of the pet cats in the courtyard. When it couldn't find any cats, it liked to talk nonsense when it was bored. General started to feel that the eastern courtyard was interesting when the black cat on the 5th floor appeared. It felt that it didn't have any communication barriers with the black cat. This was too rare, and it was the blessing of a bird's life. After getting along for a long time, General gradually stopped provoking the other cats in the courtyard. It focused on fighting the invaders of the western courtyard with the 4 cheap guests of the eastern courtyard. Every year, when General was brought to the south for the winter and returned to the eastern courtyard of Tsinghua University, it would first greet the black cat on the 5th floor. Until one day when General returned to the courtyard after a business trip with Professor Tan, it heard that the black cat on the 5th floor had gone missing. It stood by the iron fence on the balcony every day and shouted loudly, but the black cat didn't show its head. Because of this, General was listless for a while. It felt that it had lost its confidant in the eastern courtyard and couldn't find any fun. However, after a period of time, the General found a new source of amusement. This made the General, who had been listless all this time, tremble again. On the 3rd floor, Mao sat in front of his laptop and played games. Next to him was a can of beer and a box of chicken wings. His daughter was brought to her grandfather's house by his wife, and they were going to stay there for a while. Mao wanted to go with them, but it was chased back after a few days. Yuan Air's grandfather was a cultural researcher. Every time Yuan Air went over, he would test her on her knowledge. Knowing that his little granddaughter knew a lot, the old man was quite happy at first, but gradually the old man's face fell. What did it mean to chop wood but to sharpen a knife? What did it mean to be a man of integrity? What did it mean to be a man of virtue? The old man was so angry that his beard was almost pulled off. Before his little granddaughter was led astray, the old man decided to straighten her out himself. As for Mao, who taught these things, it was chased back by the old man. At this moment there were only Mao and Black Rice in the house. Playing games, watching movies and drinking alone at home was not bad. Black Rice was there to keep them company. Besides, when school started in September, their daughter would come back. These days would pass in the blink of an eye. It wasn't hard. Mao went around and swayed its legs proudly. It picked up the can of beer and drank a few mouthfuls. Just as it was feeling proud, Mao heard a stifled voice singing from outside. My house is on the Lus slope, the wind blows over the slope. It was the B*Tsich upstairs. The next moment another voice shouted. Whether it's the northwest wind or the southeast wind, it's my song, my song. It was the brat who just moved in from the 4th floor. Song my ass. Crack crack crack. Mao squeezed the can of beer until it was twisted. The joy of winning a round was completely destroyed by this chorus. He smashed the can of beer onto the ground. Damn it, I can't live like this anymore. Ever since the brat from the 4th floor moved in a few days ago, this kind of affectionate duet happened frequently. Yesterday he sang Childhood. What the hell did the bird know about childhood? The day before yesterday he sang Birds on the Tree in Pairs. Damn it, Mao got goosebumps when he heard it. The day before yesterday he sang A Cut of Plum. It was August and Tsinghua City was so hot that it was smoking. Even if you took off all your clothes you would still find it too hot. No matter how well he sang, Mao couldn't understand the concept of snowflakes fluttering in the north wind. Besides, the two lunatics upstairs didn't sing well at all. Speaking of the brat on the 4th floor, even though the brat had been going door to door the moment he arrived and was quite popular in the compound, Mao still felt that he was an eyesore no matter how he looked at him. He felt that the brat was full of evil tricks and wanted to kick him before talking. He didn't know why Black Rice, who had always been wary of others, was so close to the brat. Finally the singing outside ended. Mao thought to himself, it's over. If it's over I'll continue playing. But before Mao finished a round, Black Rice, who was lying on the side, pricked up its ears and jumped onto the desk. It walked to the window and looked outside. The next moment, Mao heard a few cat meows from downstairs. After being in contact with cats for a long time, Mao also had the ability to distinguish the sounds of cats. When it heard the sound, it could tell which cat was making the sound, especially this sound. Once Mao heard it, it knew that it was the little bastard with the mole beside its mouth. Mao got up and was about to chase the little bastard away when he heard the brat from the 4th floor shout, "Wait!" Downstairs, Peanut Candy looked at the 4th floor and then at the 3rd floor. She obediently walked to the side and waited. Not far away, the sheriff and Ah Huang had already tiptoed over briskly. On the 1st floor, De Pang, who was squatting on the balcony, craned his neck to look upstairs when Peanut Candy came over. When the brat from the 4th floor showed his head, he walked to the door and meowed into the room. The old lady in the room, who was reading a book with her reading glasses, looked up at De Pang. Going out to play? Remember to come back on time. Don't fight. On the 3rd floor, Mao looked down and saw the brat from the 4th floor run down with the 4 cats following him. That brat is going to bring these cats to a gang fight again? Why did I say, again? Mao was puzzled. He went back to his room and sat down, still thinking about the reason. On the 4th floor, General saw that the brat who was singing with him was now going out for a walk with the cats. He didn't even look at him. He couldn't help but stomp on the iron fence around the balcony. As he stomped on the fence, he shouted, "Let me out! Let me out! Let me out!" Professor Tan, who was on the phone with someone, brought over a small water bottle and pointed at the watermelon sprouts in the flower pot on the ground. "Good boy, plant watermelons." Professor Tan used to distract General when he was angry, but this time General didn't want to do it. He continued to stomp on the fence. Air Mao finally sorted out his emotions and decided to continue playing games to relieve his boredom. He took a deep breath and put on his headphones. He decided to ignore what was happening outside. Chapter 5. The bell rang, and after the teachers left the classroom, the students in the classroom began to move. In the corridor outside the long row of classrooms, the teachers passing by with textbooks and the students coming out to exercise curiously looked at the two people standing in the corridor. There was no lack of ridicule and contempt among them. In the eyes of the students, those who were punished by the teachers were bad students. Naturally, they would not be friendly to bad students. Some of the students who passed by did not even bother to look at them and completely ignored them. Of the two people who were punished, the student on the left had a smile on his face and looked a little frivolous. This person was quite famous in the nearby classes because he was thick-skinned and was the type of person who repeatedly violated the rules. He was a typical bottom feeder. At this moment, this person was talking to a classmate who came out of the classroom. He did not feel that he was punished at all. To him, this was a common occurrence and was not a big deal. The person on the right had his head lowered and was expressionless. Of course, because his head was lowered, even if he had an expression, it would not be seen by his classmates. "Hey, why are these two people in your class being punished?" Someone in the next class whispered to someone they knew. "You know our class is Song Ning, right?" The person who was asked gave a you-know look. The surrounding students had an "oh, so that's why" expression. Song Ning from the third class was beautiful, had good grades and a good personality. Every time she got into the top 10 in the exam, the teachers in the class would mention it. Many people were chasing after her, but Song Ning was not interested in them at all. She was a typical good student. In less than half a day, the whole grade knew that Jiao Wei and Cheng Feng from the third class were punished by the teacher for fighting over Song Ning. There were many people in each class who loved to gossip. Half a day was enough for them to know about it. Cheng Feng was still in the mood to talk to the students passing by. He snorted and pouted at Jiao Wei. He complained to a few people who were close to him, "Crazy can't take king joke." Sometimes he spoke a little casually. He didn't expect that a casual joke would cause Jiao Wei to fight with him. Was there a need for that? Seriously, after the morning class, the two of them were led to the office by the homeroom teacher for further education. Facing the teacher's scolding, the two of them lowered their heads. However, the two of them had completely different feelings. One of them didn't care and just wanted to get through this scolding, while the other felt embarrassed. Jiao Wei was already embarrassed that he had been standing in the corridor for people to watch in the morning. Now he was being lectured by the head teacher. Listening to the head teacher's increasingly harsh words, Jiao Wei clenched his fists. His sensitive self-esteem had been whipped again and again. Something in his heart was about to explode. "Do you know what you look like? You guys are like rat shit that fell into a pot of good porridge." Not only were they bad, but they also made the whole class lose face with them. They were just like that famous Shao guy from your junior high school, scum. Trash of society. The head teacher was very young. He was only 30 years old. It was said that he graduated from a famous teachers' college in the country. He had only been in the position for 2 years. He did things by the book and claimed to be righteous. He clearly separated the good from the bad using his own standards. He would start scolding whoever crossed the line. Some people said that this head teacher did not know how to be tactful with his words. He was harsh and merciless. Today Jiao Wei and Cheng Feng had crossed the line again. If he did not scold them to his heart's content, he would not stop. He did not even think about eating lunch. The head teacher did not think that the person in front of him would dare to resist. Even the old fox, Cheng Feng, had been scolded more than 10 times without any accidents. Unexpectedly, when he was scolding, there was a sudden sound from the table. The teacher's table in front of him had been flipped. Moreover, the person who flipped the table was Jiao Wei, who did not have any bad records. Even the old fox, Cheng Feng, was so shocked that his eyes widened. The head teacher reacted quickly. After being stunned, he became angrier. He looked at Jiao Wei and said, "What do you want?" Flipping the table, "Ha! Your temper is worse than mine. I can't even talk to you? If you have the guts, don't come to school." Jiao Wei turned and walked out, ignoring the head teacher's words. Therefore, on the same day, Jiao Wei fought with a classmate. He stood in the corridor outside the class for half a day as punishment. Then he flipped the table with the head teacher. Soon, the head teacher found Jiao Wei's parents for a talk. In the afternoon, Jiao Wei went back to the shop near the school to rent a house. He did not go to school. His parents were called by the head teacher for a talk. When they came back, they wanted to say something to Jiao Wei, but they could not bear to scold him. They secretly discussed using money to send gifts to the head teacher and the school leaders. After all, Jiao Wei had to go back to school. They were also worried that the school would give him a demerit. They did not know if it would be recorded in the records. The school was looking for a bad example. From the head teacher's words, it seemed that the school had their eyes on Jiao Wei. The head teacher did not really want to expose it. If everyone knew about it, wouldn't he and his class be embarrassed? But at that time, the school leaders happened to pass by and did not let it go. Go and buy some high-end things. The people in town are not like the people in our village. They have higher standards. If you want to treat them to a meal, go to Luxury House or Wang Ting. I heard that they are very high-end. Is 5,000 renminbi enough? Do you want me to go and get more? Jiao Wei's parents were discussing. When they took out the money from the cupboard, Jiao Wei happened to see them coming out. He heard what his parents said just now. Looking at the stack of money in his father's hand, he did not know what to feel. His parents woke up early and went to bed late every day. They could not wait to use the money. But at this time, they were very decisive and did not hesitate to take out the money. 5,000 renminbi would take them a few months of hard work. After entering high school, Jiao Wei didn't focus on his studies. He had always been in the lower middle class and didn't think about how many books he had to study in the future. When he came out, he really thought about not studying in the future. He could do something by himself. Many people in the village went out to work and sent home a lot of money every year. Many of his junior high school classmates also did not study. No one could not survive. Don't go. I don't want to study. Jiao Wei said in a hoarse voice. What are you talking about? How can you not study? The first person who strongly objected was Jiao Wei's mother. She was usually the most thrifty woman. She was very firm in her opposition. Yes, we can't not study. It's okay. You wait at home first. I will go and find the teacher. Don't worry. Jiao Wei's father said. Jiao Wei's father usually liked to talk about his friend who went to the provincial capital to teach at Tsinghua University. Compared to himself, he naturally hoped that Jiao Wei would study like his friend. The couple used to work in the fields and later started a small business. Although they could barely be considered as businessmen, their characters were still the same as before. They were simple and honest. They were not like other people who knew how to get things done. They also did not use their connections and had never asked for gifts from others. When they came back, they even asked other people about it. Jiao Wei had seen people from his school go to the school leaders. In short, with the style of those leaders, people like him who were at the bottom of the social ladder had to bring 2 or 3 gifts. They did not bring any self-respect or integrity when they went to ask for help. After his parents left, Jiao Wei did not stay at home. His heart was flustered. He felt wronged, regretful, guilty, resentful, and other indescribable things. He wanted to cry but he couldn't. Jiao Wei could not stay at home. He decided to go out and walk aimlessly. The night was already dark. Jiao Wei walked through the brightly lit streets and continued to walk along the deserted road. When he was tired, he would rest for a while before continuing to walk. The further he walked, the wider the road became. This road was already far from the town center. The road was wider than the town center, but there were not many people on both sides. It was not as bustling as the town center. No matter how wide the road was, there were not many cars on it. After walking for a long time, he reached the outskirts of the town. The road was no longer flat and wide. There were no street lights and there were large tracts of farmland on both sides. Under the moonlight, the crops in the farmland swayed with the wind. From time to time, there would be some cat meowing or other strange sounds. For many people, this scene was a bit eerie. However, Jiao Wei did not feel afraid. Perhaps it was because of his mood. After walking for a while, he sat down and did not mind the dirt. Jiao Wei's mood was very complicated. He did not know what was going on in his mind. He stared at the farmland in front of him for the whole night. He did not feel sleepy at all. It was a bit cold at night, but Jiao Wei endured it and sat there the whole time. There were very few people in the outskirts of the town. There were only a few cars passing by all night. It was not until dawn that a few people appeared. They looked curiously at Jiao Wei who was sitting beside them. However, they did not go over to talk to him. They were busy with their own things. They rode their bicycles and left without stopping. Everyone was busy with their own things. Jiao Wei thought about it for the whole night but could not figure out anything. He was at a loss and did not dare to go home. He did not dare to see anyone he knew. Was he going to continue to stay here? At this time there was the sound of a motorcycle passing by. Probably because the road was not easy to travel on, the motorcycle was not fast. Originally, Jiao Wei did not plan to pay attention to it. However, he did not expect the motorcycle to drive back and stop a few steps away from Jiao Wei. Jiao Wei. The person on the motorcycle took off his helmet and asked. Seeing Jiao Wei look over, the person on the motorcycle was happy. Oh, it's really you. What's wrong? Are you playing truant? It's not the weekend today. Jiao Wei did not expect to see this person here. This person was Jiao Wei's junior high school classmate. He was also the gangster, scum, and social trash mentioned by their homeroom teacher yesterday. Gangster Zhao's grades were not good. Although he was not the worst, he was still at the bottom. He was impatient with his books and stopped studying after he graduated from junior high school. In the past 2 years, Jiao Wei had seen this person a few times. However, they did not talk. It was not that he did not know him. Right now, Jiao Wei did not want to pay attention to this person. He did not want to say a word, nor did he want to see anyone he knew. Gangster Xiao did not care about Jiao Wei's attitude. He leaned against his broken motorcycle and took out a cigarette. His legs were shaking as he took pleasure in Jiao Wei's misfortune. It was as if he was saying, "Little guy, I didn't expect you to have such a day. You're in trouble now, aren't you?" Jiao Wei ignored him. Gangster Xiao started talking to himself. He talked about his small business and achievements after graduation. He also made fun of Jiao Wei and his former classmates. After talking for a long time, Jiao Wei did not say anything. Gangster Xiao smacked his lips. "Jiao Wei, I know you people look down on me. I don't care about you people. What you think has nothing to do with me. However, since I've met you and you look so unkempt, I'll say a few words. It's up to you whether you want to listen or not." Gangster Xiao held the cigarette between his fingers and flicked the butt skillfully. "My brain can't learn those profound things you read. I didn't go to high school either. In your eyes, I'm just a gangster. But can anyone be a gangster? Some people are gangsters their whole lives. They go from a pool of good water to a stinking quagmire and then completely rot. But some people can make a name for themselves. Do you know what it means to make a name for yourself?" Jiao Wei still did not say anything. Instead, he turned his head and looked at his junior high school classmate. Seeing that Jiao Wei finally responded, Gangster Xiao became even more excited. He threw away the cigarette butt and crushed it with the tip of his foot. He raised his chin towards the field. "Do you know what that is?" Jiao Wei looked over. The morning sun had begun to appear, showing the vitality of the first day. "Morning sun?" Jiao Wei said. "Tisk," Gangster Xiao snorted disdainfully. Gangster Xiao no longer leaned on the motorcycle. Instead, he took a step towards the field. Looking at the large field in front of him, he raised his hand and pointed. Over there, and a large field over there will all be mine. You want to farm here?" Jiao Wei did not look down on farmers. His family also farmed. However, based on his understanding of Gangster Xiao, he really could not figure out why he would want to buy land. Gangster Xiao choked when Jiao Wei said farm. He wanted to say pig brain, but when he thought of this person's grades in the middle school examination, he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Instead he said, "With that brain of yours you can only study. Don't think about pursuing a career like mine. You won't be able to play. Also, don't think about learning to work in a business like others. You'll definitely be scammed." Looking at the large field, Gangster Xiao raised his arms with an intoxicated look on his face. "Jiao Wei, do you believe that this place will become a bustling district and a new town center?" Jiao Wei looked at the large field in front of him and shook his head. He could not imagine it. Gangster Xiao only gave him a superficial look and did not explain. Instead, he looked at the field and continued, "A lot of people say to me, you've missed the best time to rise up. It's too late to rise up now. However, I don't accept it. What's too late? It's not too late." As he spoke, Gangster Xiao became agitated. "You're looking down on me? Bah. I'm the one looking down on you. At least I know what I want to do. I know what my future path is. Do you know that? Other than staying in the classroom all day with your books and doing whatever the teacher tells you to do, what else do you know? Have you found your path? It'll take at least a few years to find your path. Right now, my starting point is higher than yours. As for whether you can fly a high-tech airplane and surpass my lousy motorcycle in the future, that depends on whether you have the ability. Some people like to drive around aimlessly even if they're driving a sports car. Besides, maybe my motorcycle will be replaced by a big Benz in the future? If it was someone else, they might not be able to understand these words. However, Jiao Wei understood. A language teacher in his class used to give an example. He said that everyone's starting point was the same. It was just that some people started with a big Benz while others pulled a wooden cart. Even if the starting point was the same, the speed would naturally be different. However, knowledge was a kind of armed force. There was a house of gold in the books. Although the person pulling the wooden cart was lagging behind, he might be able to fly a plane and surpass it in the future. He said that studying was the only way out for the poor. And people like Gangster Xiao were the bad examples that all the teachers talked about. It was no wonder that Gangster Xiao was so resentful. It seemed that he was very clear about the teacher's impression of him. After Gangster Xiao vented enough of his resentment and ambition, he took 2 deep breaths and looked at Jiao Wei from the corner of his eyes. There's an old saying that says, "The higher you fly, the further you can see." Don't think that you've done your best just by flapping your wings. As for how high you can fly, you'll only know when you've flown. You think the sky is falling just because you've been wronged? You're like a sissy. I can't stand your cowardice. You'll have to learn from me. Gangster Xiao paused, then arrogantly used his standard dialect to say a sentence in English. I'm a shunyamer. Jiao Wei, Gangster Xiao had said enough. He got on the motorcycle and put on his helmet. He still cherished his life. Jiao Wei stood up with some difficulty. He moved his legs that were numb from sitting for too long. Give me a ride. F***ck off. We're on different paths. No ride. Gangster, I'll take my crappy motorcycle and leave first. You should go back and build your intellectual plane. That's all you can do with your brain. Find a direction and fly quickly. Of course, if you don't do well, you can come back and work for me. Since we were junior high school classmates, I'll give you a higher salary. Before he finished speaking, he had already sped away on his motorcycle. Looking at the motorcycle leaving dust in the air, and then looking at the endless road, Jiao Wei suddenly realized that he really seemed to have run far away. He didn't see any cars on the road, so he had to walk back. A cat scurried out from the field next to him. It looked at Jiao Wei, then continued to run into the field to catch swaying leaves. On the other side of the field, there was a small residential building with bricks and tiles in his line of sight. Someone shouted a few times in his direction, followed by the sound of bowls being knocked on. The cat that was playing with leaves in the field immediately stood up and ran in that direction. As it ran, it meowed as if it was responding. Jiao Wei raised his hand to block the sunlight to take a look. He took a deep breath and started to walk back along the road. He hadn't been home the whole night. He hadn't called either. His parents were probably so worried that they hadn't slept the whole night. 10 years later, a car stopped in front of Tsinghua University. Jiao Wei got out of the car. He had followed his doctoral supervisor to a company that had a collaboration project. His supervisor had a house nearby, so he dropped Jiao Wei off on the way back. Jiao Wei went to his family's small restaurant to eat before entering the university. He had a few documents that needed to be stamped by the institute. Jiao Wei didn't walk far along the main campus road when he heard someone calling him. He followed the voice and saw a person with a smiling face running towards him. Yo Qingfeng, why didn't you call me when you came over? Jiao Wei smiled and said to the person. The company organized a training here. I thought you weren't here. Didn't you say you had something to do a while ago? Did you just come back? Cheng Feng wiped the sweat off his forehead. They said it's training for cadres, but they actually want to do military training. Damn, I haven't been trained like this since my first year in university. It's so hot. Luckily your school has a lot of trees. The quality of the female students in your school is pretty good. My school was focused on engineering and it was filled with monks. Even if the girls there looked like frogs, they would have already been booked. Hey look, that girl has a nice body. Don't you already have a wife? Jiao Wei asked. Hey, I'm not with you now. Look at your serious face. You haven't improved at all. Cheng Feng's eyes wandered over to the few girls who were walking over as he spoke. Jiao Wei smiled. Cheng Feng was always like this. They had fought many times before, but they became close after that. They were like that when they were students. They would beat each other until their faces were swollen. Maybe they would call each other brothers in the next match. Who hadn't done a few stupid things before? Teenagers had the impulsiveness of teenagers, and adults had the way of thinking of adults. After leaving school for a few years, Cheng Feng was naturally more mature in judging people and situations. What happened in high school? At that time, it was just some unimportant friction, straightforward. As a man, he wouldn't fuss over the trivial matters of the past. After leaving school and entering society, you would realize that the people who called you brothers in one moment could backstab you in the next. The friendship from high school could be maintained until now, so Qing Feng cherished it very much. Last year, during a high school reunion, Qing Feng even dragged Jiao Wei to drink. Not only Qing Feng but Jiao Wei's homeroom teacher was also there. The homeroom teacher from back then, who was strict and harsh with his words, had changed. He had been a homeroom teacher for more than 10 years, and he had taught each batch of students. He also had his own understanding. During the reunion, he even chatted with Jiao Wei and Qing Feng about what happened back then. The three of them were quite calm. Qing Feng even drank a few glasses with the homeroom teacher and called each other brothers. As he clinked glasses with the homeroom teacher, Qing Feng said, "Homeroom teacher, back then you said that we were social trash. Look, haven't we become social elites now?" The homeroom teacher also smiled. "Back then I was angry that you didn't fight for it. I'm also gratified that you're like this now. Speaking of which, back then you all listened to me when I lectured you." At this point, the homeroom teacher looked at Jiao Wei. Jiao Wei coughed and rubbed his nose. He recalled the time when he flipped the table in front of the homeroom teacher. "What's there to be embarrassed about? I'm also responsible." The homeroom teacher clinked glasses with Jiao Wei and drank a mouthful of wine before saying, "You also worked hard. When you were admitted to Tsinghua University, the principal was so happy that he took his precious wine and dragged your father to drink with him a few times." After drinking the wine in his glass, the homeroom teacher smiled as Qing Feng poured another glass of wine. "I really miss the past. It's not like now. Those students can't be talked to or touched. They're so delicate. Just a few words and they'll drag their parents over to quarrel. Otherwise they'll take out their phones and scold them." Regardless of whether it was the students with good grades or the ones at the bottom of the class, the balding middle-aged man recognized the students who had changed a lot and recalled each and every one of them. Those were the students he had taught. Other than the homeroom teacher, Hooligan Xiao, who had now become a big boss, had also changed. The farmland area back then had become the new economic center of the town. Not only in the town, but Hooligan Xiao had also made a name for himself in the city. Speaking of Hooligan Xiao, although Qing Feng was not in the same class as Jiao Wei and Hooligan Xiao in junior high, he still knew Hooligan Xiao and had contacted him later. "Some time ago, during my nephew's first birthday party, I met Hooligan Xiao when I went back to my hometown. That kid drove a big Benz and looked like a dog. When he came out, he even had bodyguards behind him. I heard that he's some famous entrepreneur in the city. He often comes into contact with the city leaders. Even the boss of the new building in the city is related to that kid." "Oh right, Hooligan Xiao said that he would treat us to a meal at his new hotel this new year," Qing Feng said. "I might have to disappoint you," Jiao Wei said regretfully. "What's wrong?" Before Jiao Wei could speak, Qing Feng made a stop gesture. "Don't talk to me about this project or that project. I don't understand. Just tell me more clearly." "I'm going abroad in December this year. I'm working on a project with my supervisor's former teacher. I won't be back for about 2 years. I should have gone last year, but I had something to do here." "2 years? Postgraduate?" Qing Feng felt that it was a pity. He guessed that Jiao Wei would not be able to make it to his wedding. "What about after 2 years? Stay abroad? Or come back?" "Come back. I plan to stay in school." "Ah, that's good. Our company is not far from here. I can come and drink with you often." Qing Feng smiled. After a pause, he winked at Jiao Wei. "I heard that Song Ning is studying for a doctorate here?" "Yes, but she's in the management school." "Don't fool me. Tell me something I don't know, okay? What's our relationship? We're brothers. What's there to be embarrassed about?" Jiao Wei smiled and looked at the road in front of him. He did not say anything. The tall sycamore trees on both sides of the road blocked out the scorching sun above. Only a few tiny specks of light sprinkled down. Gusts of wind blew past, dispersing the heat brought by the August heat. 10 years ago, the hooligan who rode a broken motorcycle pointed to a large piece of farmland and talked about his glorious future. 10 years ago, the person beside him fought with him and stood in the corridor with a bloody nose and a swollen face as punishment. The two of them hated each other. 10 years ago, the young man who couldn't find a way forward had a stupid fight. Walking along the sycamore path, Jiao Wei suddenly remembered the first time he came here. That day, a black cat led him through this path. "Hey, your school is quite harmonious." Qing Feng's words pulled Jiao Wei back to reality. Looking in the direction Qing Feng pointed, Jiao Wei saw a large lawn near the eastern courtyard. There, under the camphor tree, a young man sat casually on the grass. He held a thick book and stared at the pages as if he was looking at an enemy. There were 3 cats lying next to the young man. Jiao Wei recognized all of them. The fat dragonly was lying there peacefully with its eyes closed and taking a nap. Huang was rubbing its back on the grass. The sheriff was flapping its paws as if it had found something on the grass. As he read, the young man put the book down on the grass and rubbed Huang, who was rubbing against him, a few times as if he was kneading dough. Then he rolled on the grass and whispered as he rolled, "It's so hard, so hard." Ching Feng saw this scene and sighed. "Hey, it's so good to be a cat. There's not so much trouble. There's no need to memorize books, take exams, train in the hot weather, write notes, and no one will scold you if you don't do well." "Is it good to be a cat?" Jiao Wei asked. "How would I know? I've never been a cat." Ching Feng laughed. "How about being a cat? Who knows? That's all for now. I'm preparing a new book. I'll try to release it in January." Chapter 6. Zheng Tan jumped onto the branch of a sycamore tree, squinted his eyes and looked at the sunlight leaking through the gaps between the leaves. He used his current furry paws to push his ears, found a comfortable position to lie down and yawned. In the afternoon of September, the sun was just right, suitable for an afternoon nap. Zheng Tan was a cat, but he used to be a real person. He didn't understand what was going on, but he woke up like this. A strange city, a strange house, strange people, a strange and even more despairing new identity, a magnified world, and an era back in 2003. Zheng Tan didn't like cats before and even hated them. He always felt that cats were on the same level as crazy creatures, but now he himself had become such an animal. Retribution? Zheng Tan admitted that his style wasn't very good. He had bullied the weak, set a few fires that weren't very big and didn't do his job properly. He had once lived a life of luxury and drunkenness, but at least he hadn't killed anyone. Using his own moral values that he had kicked in the corner for as long as he could remember, there were many people who were worse than him. Why did he have to be the one suffering retribution? Was he at a loss? Was he at a loss? Was he angry? Was he in despair? In the face of an incomparably clear reality, everything seemed to be useless. For his once indulgent life, Zheng Tan could only comfort himself with a sentence. When the wind blows away the eggshells, the wealth is gone and the people are happy. 3 months had passed, a quarter of a year had passed, and the wheel of nature had turned 90 degrees. Zheng Tan's mood when he first came here had calmed down, and he gradually became familiar with it. Sometimes, being unambitious and muddling along was a rare state of mind. This was the century-old famous university, Tsinghua University, which ranked first among the universities in the central region of Wuxia. The advantage of a century-old famous university was that the area was large enough, and the greenery was in place. Occasionally, students would walk on the road under the tree. The atmosphere here was quiet, but it didn't lose its vitality. Zheng Tan closed his eyes for a while in this good atmosphere, and was awakened by the sound of dogs barking. Zheng Tan's ears twitched. He didn't need to look to know which 2 people were causing a ruckus. About 100 meters away from Zheng Tan, a brown chihuahua was barking at a camphor tree. On the branch of the camphor tree stood a cat with black and white fur. The cat was wagging its tail and barking at the tree. On the surface, this situation was very common, and pet owners often encountered this situation. However, the difference in the current situation was that both the dog and the cat were barking. The cat's name was Sheriff. It was 8 months old and slightly smaller than Zheng Tan. It got its name because its fur color was very similar to the black cat Sheriff in the cartoon. At the same time, this cat was also one of Zheng Tan's bad friends after he turned into a cat. This cat had 2 characteristics. One was that it was aggressive and didn't care about its life when it fought. The other was that it could bark like a dog. When Zheng Tan first saw Sheriff, it was squatting on a 1-meter-tall landscape stone and barking at the chihuahua. When Sheriff noticed that Zheng Tan was looking at it, it slowly changed from barking to meowing. In fact, Sheriff's dog language wasn't standard at the time, and it was a bit out of place. However, as the days passed, the dog language became more and more authentic. Most people couldn't tell if it was real or fake. When the cat was tired, it would stick out its tongue and pant like a dog. Therefore, Zheng Tan often wondered if there was a dog's soul living in the cat's body. Zheng Tan didn't pay attention to it anymore. He yawned and continued to sleep. He wasn't worried about Sheriff's safety at all. Sheriff and the Chihuahua had been fighting since they were young, so it was very experienced. Why did Sheriff always have a problem with the Chihuahua? The reason was that the Chihuahua was the smallest pet dog in the East Side family compound. Pick the fresh fish to eat and pick the soft persimmons to pinch. Even cats knew this. Zheng Tan slept all the way until the bell rang for the end of the third period in the university's teaching area. She stretched herself and slowly slid down from the tall Chinese parasol tree. Trot along the walkway, then through a peach grove, and you'll see a wall. This was an elementary school attached to Tsinghua University. Many of the children of the staff and family members went to school here. It was convenient for parents to pick up and drop off their children. Zheng Tan jumped on the wall and looked at the classrooms on the second and sixth floor. He then walked along the wall towards the school gate. Zheng Tan waited on the wall about 20 meters away from the school gate. 7 to 8 minutes later, the bell rang for the end of class. It wasn't a sharp bell, but a lively and cheerful music. It was very human-like. A little girl wearing a floral dress and carrying a Hello Kitty backpack walked out of the corridor. She looked towards Zheng Tan as soon as she came out of the staircase. Seeing Zheng Tan squatting on the wall, the little girl's emotionless eyes lit up and she ran towards him. Brother Yuan said that they have a quiz in the last period. We might have to wait a little longer. Before the little girl could finish her sentence, Zheng Tan saw a person rushing out of the staircase. He was dragging his school bag like a sack, and his hair was messy like a chicken's nest. He ran straight towards them with a smug smile on his face. He made a victory sign in the shape of a V at Zheng Tan and the little girl. It seemed that this kid did well in the quiz in the last period. The boy's name was Jiao Yuan. He was the child of the family that had adopted Zheng Tan. He was in the 6th grade. The little girl's name was Gu Yuzi. She was Jiao Yuan's cousin. After her parents divorced, Jiao Ma brought her back from abroad for some reason. She lived with the Jiao family and was now in the 2nd grade of Chu University-affiliated primary school. Jiao Yuan took Gu Yuzi's school bag from her. The two of them and the cat left the school gate and walked towards the Eastern District family compound. Look, Jiao Yuan's cat is here to pick them up again, someone said. Most of the people they met on the way were already used to this scene. It had been 3 weeks since school started, and it used to be an interesting topic for people around them after meals. The Eastern District family compound wasn't far from the affiliated primary school. They arrived in less than 10 minutes. The Jiao family lived on the 5th floor of Block B of the Eastern District family compound. There was a security guard at the entrance of every building. Jiao Yuan touched his keychain to the door, and the iron door opened with a ding sound. There was a small round tag on Jiao Yuan's keychain. This was the key for the security guard. Almost everyone who lived in the Jiao family building had one. Zheng Tan also had one around his neck. However, this one was a little special. Zheng Tan's face was pasted on the front of the round tag, and the Jiao family's home address and contact number were pasted on the back. The Jiao Pa had specially made the key card and the pet tag into one. When Zheng Tan entered the building, he looked at the balcony of a family on the 1st floor. He didn't see the fat guy. He guessed that the fat guy had been taken to visit relatives again. At this time of the day, the Jiao family's door was always open. After all, it was the Jiao family building. There were security guards and security cameras at the entrance. It was much safer than some of the apartments outside. Jiao Ma was cooking and there were sounds of people talking in the living room. Then, I'll have to trouble you with the advertisement. Zheng Tan stopped in his tracks. He was familiar with this voice. It was the owner of a pet store near Tsinghua University. His surname was Gua. His brother was a veterinarian. Zheng Tan's vaccine was given by his brother. Chapter 7. Xiaoguo's customers were mostly people from Tsinghua University. It was not easy to do business with university teachers and students. Food safety and quality problems were easily exposed here. People who spent all day in the laboratory facing boring experimental data and equipment would sometimes find something fun for themselves. For example, they would take a bus to the snack alley and buy a bowl of hot and dry noodles with chili oil. Then they would bring it back to the laboratory to test whether there was Sudan red in the chili oil, aflatoxin in the sesame sauce, and whether there was E. coli in the chili oil. Therefore, to do business with university teachers and students and to have a good reputation, it required a long-term guarantee of excellent quality. But because of this, Xiaoguo's shop had a strong reputation. It was popular and had funds. He bought a few shops around and merged them with his brother's pet clinic and his pet supply store to form the Ming Ming Pet Center. This was Zheng Tan's understanding of Xiaoguo. In general, Zheng Tan felt that Xiaoguo was a good person. He was smart, could make money, and was not a bad person. At least he was kind to animals. After Xiaoguo left, the Jiao family did not mention anything about the canned cat commercial. After dinner, the Jiao Yuan and Gu Yuzi went to their rooms to do homework. The Jiao Ma went to the gymnasium with a few friends to learn how to dance. Zheng Tan entered the master bedroom. After entering, she pushed the door shut, jumped up and turned the lock, locking the door. In the bedroom, the Jiaopa was already sitting at the desk, waiting. The Jiaopa was already used to Zheng Tan's series of actions after entering the door. He did not even look up. After Zheng Tan jumped onto the desk, the Jiaopa closed the file in his hand. Today Xiaogui came over and talked about the canned cat commercial. I did not immediately agree. I still want to see what you think. The Jiaopa said as he handed a file to Zheng Tan. The document was about the canned cat food advertisement that Xiaogui mentioned today, as well as the Jiaopa's analysis of the future situation and benefits based on Xiaogui's words. Zheng Tan took a look at it. It was a kind of canned cat food produced by Xiaogui's family. Many cat owners in the school bought this kind of canned cat food. It was cheap and convenient. Most importantly, it could withstand the quality inspection. Xiaogui had originally planned to promote the canned cat food, but the SARS outbreak had ruined the original plan. Now that it had recovered and was ready to restart the plan, the establishment of the pet center in the store made Xiaogui very tight on cash. Therefore, he was even more eager to make use of the canned cat food to make a fortune. Although there were very few pet food advertisements on TV in China, Zheng Tan knew that there was a demand for pet food after he came here, and there were a lot of potential customers. With the development of the economy, the pace of life in the city was getting faster and faster. People did not even have time to take care of themselves. Even if they wanted to raise a cat, they had to think about how to raise it. Zheng Tan did not think of himself as an economic genius. He used to be, and he still was, but he believed that if this was done well, he could make a fortune out of it. Zheng Tan did not eat cat food. He ate the same food as the Jiao family. Ever since he turned into a cat, Zheng Tan was thankful that he had a strong stomach. Moreover, shooting an advertisement did not necessarily mean that he had to eat cat food. Seriously speaking, shooting a simple advertisement was not a big deal for Zheng Tan. After all, it was only a pet food advertisement. According to the document, the distribution channel was only through the internet. If the effect on the internet was obvious, there would definitely be follow-up advertisements. This first advertisement was definitely simpler. It was to test the waters. The reason why Xiaogui came to Zheng Tan was clear in Zheng Tan's heart. Money was tight and he had to save as much as he could. The foreigners used tons of food to shoot the cat and dog wars. Although Xiaogui's advertisement was much bigger than that, it would definitely use up some food. Of course, this was the case for other cats. Zheng Tan was completely different. Zheng Tan looked at the document and was thinking about the pros and cons. The Jiaopa said, "You don't have to make a decision immediately." I told Xiaogui. "Just reply within 3 days." Hearing that he had 3 days to think about it, Zheng Tan was not in a hurry. With his current identity, he did need to think more about it. As soon as he put down the document, Zheng Tan heard someone knocking on the door. It was not the door but the door outside. The Jiaopa got up to open the door. Zheng Tan did not immediately go over. He pricked up his ears to listen to the sounds in the living room. It sounded like the otaku who lived across the street. He was a family member of the teaching staff. His parents were both school teachers. The guy lived at home almost all day. He usually liked to wear t-shirts with designs like StarCraft, Spider-Man, Star Wars, and SpongeBob SquarePants. He washed his clothes once a week, even in the summer. Zhang Ziyan wondered if the guy's clothes would grow mushrooms if they were piled up for a week in the summer. Hearing the voice, the guy seemed a little embarrassed. Zheng Tan jumped off the desk and walked to the door to take a look. The guy was holding a box of food in one hand and scratching his head with the other. "Brother Jiao, I want to borrow your cat. The rats at my place are almost turning into demons. I can't even catch a single one of them with the rat trap I bought. I've been so worried these past few days. When is it convenient for you? Can you, borrow the cat?" Zheng Tan looked down on him. He remembered that one day last month, this guy had boasted to the Jiao Yuan that there were no rats in his house. The next day, Zheng Tan heard the guy wailing that the internet cable had been gnawed off. He had bought rat traps and rat traps. Except for rat poison, he had tried almost everything. Zheng Tan pondered. Could it be that the rats in the university generally had a high IQ? However, Zheng Tan remembered that after he became a cat, he hadn't caught any rats. The Jiao family never had any rats. Zheng Tan wasn't sure if it was because of him, but he didn't know where to start. It wasn't that he was scared. Zheng Tan had caught rats in middle school to scare the girls in his class. However, cats were different from humans. Zheng Tan looked down at his cat paws. He was very annoyed. The Jiaopa had finished talking to the guy. He closed the door and walked back to his room. He waved at Zheng Tan. "Do you know how to catch rats?" Zheng Tan was silent and didn't move. After a while Jing Tan heard the Jiaopa say, "Let's go and try." Try where? Oh. Jing Tan was puzzled. The Jiaopa took the keys in a plastic bag. He told the Jiao Yuan that he was leaving and asked Jing Tan to go out. Jing Tan sat in the Jiaopa's electric scooter and left the main house. Looking at the familiar road, Jing Tan roughly knew where he was going. However, Jing Tan wasn't sure how he was going to try it out. He was stronger than the average cat. Jing Tan felt that he could be stronger. After a year and a half, he might be able to reach the strength of an adult. However, being strong didn't mean that he could catch rats. Jing Tan didn't like cats very much. He didn't know how normal cats caught rats, so he didn't pay much attention to it. While he was thinking, the electric scooter arrived at its destination, Tsinghua University School of Life Sciences. As an associate professor of Tsinghua University School of Life Sciences, the Jiaopa spent most of his time here except for eating at home. After parking the scooter, the Jiaopa shook the plastic bag in his hand. Jing Tan curled his lips and jumped in. The School of Life Sciences wasn't a place where a cat could walk around freely. It would be bad if it was seen. Then, Associate Professor Jiao walked in through the front door of the School of Life Sciences with the plastic bag in his hand. He even calmly greeted the people coming in and out of the building. When he walked to the stairs, there weren't many people. Most people were used to taking the elevator. Jing Tan poked his head out of the bag and looked outside. At 7 o'clock in the evening, there were still many people in the School of Life Sciences. All the lights in the laboratories were on. Jing Tan could see the UV sterilization lights in the sterile room across the street through the window at the stairs. When the Jiao Yuan brought him in for the first time, Jing Tan was very nervous. After a few times, Jing Tan calmed down. Jing Tan felt lucky that his adoptive family wasn't a Frankenstein monster. The Jiaopa's office was on the second floor. It was an independent office. Jiaopa was one of the few associate professors in Tsinghua University School of Life Sciences to have an independent office. When Jiaoma was too busy, the Jiao Yuan and the others would come here to do homework or take a nap. Sometimes Jing Tan would come with them. But every time he would sneak in. If he wasn't hiding in his bag, he would be wrapped in his clothes and brought in. The Jiaopa went into his office and took a bunch of keys. Then he carried Jing Tan up the stairs to the fourth floor. There weren't many people in the corner of the fourth floor. Jing Tan had never been here before. The Jiaopa's footsteps were particularly clear in the quiet corridor. The voice-activated lights in the corridor lit up, and Jing Tan saw the door signs of the surrounding rooms. No wonder there weren't many people here. This place was basically filled with medical supplies. But Jing Tan's nose twitched. He smelled the scent of a creature. The Jiaopa stopped at the room closest to the wall and opened the door with the key. The door creaked as soon as it opened. Even though the lighting was dim, Jing Tan could see the layout of the room clearly. There were a few empty cages to the side. The cages used to feed the white mice were placed in the inner room. There was a small lab table and shelves near the door. The Jiaopa turned on the lights and placed the bag on the lab table. He said to Jing Tan, "Wait here for a while. Don't go anywhere. Don't touch anything in the lab. There are a lot of drugs." Chapter 8. To put it nicely, lab rats were generally mild-mannered. To put it bluntly, they were a group of idiots. Perhaps it was due to inbreeding. Recently, Jing Tan had been hearing Jiaopa talk about this in his genetics PowerPoint presentation. Therefore, when he saw the cage of lab rats, Jing Tan sighed in his heart. It was just as the Jiaopa had said. He did not see any fear in the eyes of the lab rats. They might have even thought that the breeder had come and was busy begging for food. The Jiaopa grabbed a lab rat from the cage and placed it on the table. He said to Jing Tan, "Watch over it. Don't let it run around." Jing Tan looked at the lab rat that did not seem to know that it was about to face its doom. He raised a paw and pressed down on the lab rat's tail. The lab rat did not struggle too much when its tail was pressed down. It just looked like it was about to crawl forward. Look, this was the difference between wild and domesticated rats. If the lab rats outside had their tails pressed down, they would either struggle desperately to break free or bite back. The Jiaopa put the remaining 4 lab rats into an empty cardboard box so that they could not see what was happening outside. "I don't know how you cats catch rats or how you kill them. I'm just telling you the methods that we use." As he spoke, the Jiaopa took the lab rat from Jing Tan's paw. "Let me tell you, in the domestic laboratories, they basically use the method of breaking the neck. This is also the method of killing a white mouse with the least pain. If the method is neat, it won't feel any pain at all. It's also in line with the animal welfare that foreigners talk about." Jing Tan squatted by the side and watched quietly. He knew that the Jiaopa had entered teaching mode again. Sometimes, after the Jiaopa prepared his PowerPoint presentation at home, he would give it a try and the listener would be Zheng Tan. Therefore, when Zheng Tan heard the Jiaopa say, "Let me tell you," he knew that the Jiaopa had entered teaching mode again. Execution by breaking the neck, to put it bluntly, is to dislocate the cervical vertebrae and sever the spinal cord from the brainstem. One hand used a tool or directly clamped the mouse's neck, the other hand grabbed its tail, and both hands pulled forcefully. That was all. This is one of the methods. We often use the other method as well. You can give it a try. Watch. As the Jiaopa spoke, he used his left hand to grab the white mouse's tail. His right thumb and index finger moved to the white mouse's neck and pressed down. Then there was no then. Zheng Tan looked at the motionless white mouse on the table, then looked at the Jiaopa, who had an "I have faith in you" expression on his face, and pulled his ears. See, the operation is actually very simple. It doesn't matter if you've never caught a mouse before. You just have to practice for a while. I've seen how fast you beat up Huang. Catching a mouse shouldn't be a problem. The Huang that the Jiaopa mentioned was a yellow tiger-striped cat. It was also one of Zheng Tan's bad friends after he turned into a cat. Unlike Sheriff, Huang always did things that made people not know whether to laugh or cry. Many times when Zheng Tan saw it, he wanted to beat it up. However, recently Huang did not appear much and for some reason he did not know. The Jiaopa caught another white mouse and let Zheng Tan try it himself. Zheng Tan killed the first white mouse and pressed it 3 times before the poor white mouse completely died. When he killed the second white mouse, Zheng Tan used too much strength, but at least this white mouse did not feel any pain and died. Zheng Tan felt more and more lucky that he turned into a cat and not a mouse. Every step down the pyramid of the food chain meant that he had to face another layer of hell. Cervical dislocation is very easy. Mice's cervical vertebrae are very fragile. You're just not skilled enough, the Jiaopa advised. Don't hesitate. It's best if you can succeed on the first try. Otherwise, the mouse will be in a lot of pain. However, pay attention to breaking the spinal cord and brain, not pulling the head off directly. You have to control the amount of strength used. You have to break the cervical vertebrae and not pull the head off directly. You have to break the neck. Some of my former students used too much strength and directly caused the pressure in the mouse's eyeballs to be too high. Zheng Tan was speechless. This is so King scary. Zheng Tan looked at the Jiaopa's calm face when he said these words. Suddenly he felt that the Jiaopa's eyes seemed to be shining with a cold light. Zheng Tan remembered a conversation he had with a group of fair-weather friends when they went to a nightclub. At that time someone said, "In fact, the most powerful killers are not those who look fierce on the outside, not those who carry big knives with tattoos and wear nose rings, and not those who play with knives and guns all day long to show that they are very powerful. It's those who look normal on the outside but can easily take a life in the next moment without batting an eyelid." Therefore, from a certain point of view, some experienced experimenters were somewhat similar to killers. Experimenters who entered the experimental state were King scary. Zheng Tan thought about it again. Perhaps Associate Professor Jiao was the only person in the world who taught his cat how to break the neck of a mouse. After killing the third and fourth mouse, Zheng Tan obviously felt a lot better. At least these 2 mice had a more dignified death compared to the previous 2 mice. Of the 5 mice, the Jiaopa demonstrated by killing 1 mouse, and the other 4 were killed by Zheng Tan. After cleaning up the 5 dead mice, the Jiaopa turned around and went into the back room. Not long after, he came out with a bigger cage. There were still 5 mice inside, but they were much bigger in size. These are rats. The rats used in the laboratory are albino variants of the Norvegicus norvegicus. Use the same method as before but use more strength. Just still a little bit. Find the key points, control the strength and succeed in 1 hit. Do you need me to demonstrate? Zheng Tan shook his head. Good boy. Zheng Tan was speechless. Just as the Jiaopa said, the rats were a little bit more difficult. However, after testing the 5 rats, Zheng Tan was already familiar with it. Do you still want to practice? The Jiaopa asked. Zheng Tan shook his head. Very good. Let's stop here for killing mice. Let me tell you, Zheng Tan pulled his ear. Here we go again. Although they had killed all the mice, the Jiaopa was obviously still in teaching mode. In our laboratory, other than the commonly used cervical dislocation method to kill rats, there are other methods such as decapitation, bloodletting, beating, anesthesia, and gas. For example, we use the marrow destruction method for frogs. A needle is enough. I'll be teaching an animal anatomy class next week, and I'll be dissecting bullfrogs. I'll bring one back for you to demonstrate. Oh, and you have to pay special attention. Most of the cats and dogs in the laboratory are killed by air embolization. After a pause, the Jiaopa looked at Jing Tan and said, "Do you understand this?" Jing Tan shook his head. His muscles were a little stiff, and the fur on his back and tail was still standing. He felt that the temperature around him was very low. In layman's terms, this method is to inject air into the veins. Jing Tan shivered. Even if he didn't know much about this, he knew what would happen if air was injected into the veins. The air enters the bloodstream and circulates to the lungs, blocking the pulmonary arteries and causing severe shock or death. For example, when you swim from deep water to a diving place, the change in pressure will cause the air in the lungs to expand. If you don't get rid of the excess air or don't get rid of it in time, it will be quite dangerous. Some passengers on the Titanic who fell into the water died this way. The Jiaopa suddenly realized that it was useless to talk about the Titanic to a cat, so he went back to the topic and made a conclusion. So, you have to be careful in the future. Stay away from dangerous objects and pay attention to self-preservation. After practicing the technique of killing mice, Jing Tan had achieved his goal tonight. He also had a plan in mind. Although he was helpless when it came to catching mice, since he was a cat now, only a cat that could catch mice would be recognized. Even Huang, that idiot, could catch mice. Jing Tan believed that he could do it too. When he returned to the villa, Jing Tan saw a car parked in the open space. It was a familiar face with a military license plate. That meant that the fat guy had also come back from visiting relatives. While the Jiaopa went to park the car, Jing Tan jumped to the balcony on the first floor and looked inside. Chapter 9. 3 months ago, when Jing Tan saw Depang for the first time, it was still small and thin. Now, it was developing in the direction of its name. Therefore, Jing Tan admired the old lady who named Depang very much. She was really amazing. Depang, who was squatting on the instant noodles, seemed to have felt something strange on the balcony. It turned sideways and looked out of the window. As a result, because its movement was a little too big, the instant noodles under its butt made a crisp caw sound. Hearing this sound, Depang immediately froze. Then, it drooped its ears and slowly turned back. It no longer looked at the balcony. Its back was very sad. Jing Tan twitched the corner of his mouth. It seemed that he felt a little guilty. Well, it seemed that Depang's supper tonight would have to be reduced again. The old lady who fed Depang had a son who worked in the provincial military. Every month, the old lady would stay with the old lady for a week or two. Depang would follow her. Sometimes the old lady's son would come over to stay for a few days. Every time Depang would suffer. Jing Tan remembered that during the military training in his freshman year, if he made a mistake, he would be punished by the instructor to stand in a military posture. But now, for a spineless cat, standing in a military posture was impossible. Therefore, Depang was often punished to squat on instant noodles. After squatting, its rations would be deducted based on the degree of fragmentation of the instant noodles. On the other side, the Jiaopa had already parked the car. Jing Tan turned around and jumped off the balcony railing. He followed the Jiaopa into the building to go home. When he entered the house, the Jiaoma was already back. However, the way she looked at Jing Tan was a little strange. Jing Tan felt goosebumps all over his body. After entering the room, Jing Tan hid behind the door and pricked up his ears to listen. "What's wrong?" the Jiaopa asked. "Sai Huang has passed away." Jiaoma sighed. Jing Tan was stunned. Huang, that idiot, was still alive and kicking a few days ago, looking like he had nowhere to vent his energy. How could he? After listening to the conversation between Jiaopa and Jiaoma, Jing Tan finally understood. So it was castration, and not death. Did that mean that Huang had become a eunuch? I heard from Sister Ling that this can help Huang get rid of some of his bad habits. Coincidentally, Huang is also 8 months old, so he can undergo surgery. Today, Sister Ling also asked me if I should send our black charcoal to Shaoguo for surgery, but I refused, Jiaoma said. Behind the door, Jing Tan felt cold sweat dripping down his back. But when he heard the last sentence, he felt relieved. Our cat doesn't need it. Jiaopa decided. Everyone's cat is different. Her cat is suitable, but ours might not be. In the future, when Sister Ling tries to persuade you, you can just refuse. Yeah, I think so too. Jiaoma, who had received support, smiled again. Jing Tan, who was squatting behind the door, also let out a long sigh of relief. If he really was sent for surgery, he would rather run away and run far away than have surgery done to his family jewels. Jing Tan silently mourned for that idiot Huang in his heart. In the past, he had heard that Huang liked to pee everywhere. At home, even if he was placed in a cat litter box, he would still pee all over it. Therefore, Huang's litter box at home had 2 layers. The outer layer was the key. As for Huang, it was even more delighted when it arrived. Many places in the Dongfang family compound could smell its urine. Zheng Tan had whipped it many times for this, but it was obvious that it was the type that would not change no matter how hard he tried. Since Huang's life wasn't in danger, Zheng Tan didn't have to worry anymore. Since he knew that he had become like this, Zheng Tan had been telling himself to try his best to adapt. The next day the otaku came knocking on the Jiao family's door with dark circles under his eyes. It was Saturday and the Jiao Yuan and the others were at home eating breakfast. Yo Xiaochu, so early? Jiao Ma was a little surprised. So early? It was already past 9 o'clock, wasn't it? Gu Yuzi looked at the bright sunshine outside and then looked at the Jiao Yuan. The two continued to silently struggle with the egg noodles in their bowls. However, for Xiaochu, who usually slept late and woke up late, it was indeed very early. Jiao Ma knew this, and that was why she was surprised that comrade Xiaochu woke up before noon, which was rare. Xiaochu forced a smile, looked around the living room and asked, "Brother Jiao isn't here? He has an experimental class today, so he left early in the morning. Do you need to talk to him about something? If it's urgent, I can call him," Jiao Ma said. "Oh, it's nothing urgent." Xiaochu's eyes fell on a low stool next to the dining table, and saw the black cat eating noodles. He said to Jiao Ma, "Sister Gu, can I borrow your cat?" Jiao Yuan and Gu Yuzi, who were busy with their breakfast, put down their chopsticks at the same time and looked at comrade Little Chu, who was standing at the door awkwardly. Last month, at a certain time and place, someone had propped himself up with one hand on the wall and the other on his waist and proudly said, "There's not a single mouse in my house." Seeing the two children's eyes, Xiaochu felt even more awkward. He coughed and said to Jiao Ma, "I mentioned this to brother Jiao yesterday." Jiao Ma didn't think there was anything wrong with it. It was a good thing that someone wanted to borrow her cat, and it showed that her cat was capable. This made Jiao Ma feel an inexplicable sense of pride. Jiao Ma waved her hand, "It's not a big deal. You can borrow it whenever you want." Zheng Tan, Jiao Yuan and Gu Yuzi were speechless. When Jiao Pa wasn't around, Jiao Ma was always so dictatorial. "Thank you so much, Sister Gu. I'll bring charcoal over after dinner today." Sighed Big Sister Gu, "You don't know, but that rat in my house is almost causing me to have a nervous breakdown." After getting permission, comrade Little Chu instantly swept away his dispirited mood and went back to his room with satisfaction. Jiao Ma smiled like a morning glory. "That's the good thing about having a cat." Jiao Yuan lowered his head and poked the small porcelain bowl in front of him with his chopsticks. He tried to imitate Xiaochu's words, "There's not a single mouse in my house." Jiao Ma knocked on Jiao Yuan's head, "Eat your noodles." Gu Yuzi pursed her lips, looking very unhappy. At around 8 o'clock in the evening, Xiaochu came over to borrow the cat. Without Jiao Ma saying anything, Zheng Tan walked over to the opposite side. He had to solve this problem sooner or later. Otherwise those white mice would have been in vain. Jiao Yuan was still cheering at the door, "Black charcoal, come on. Show them what you've got." Jiao Ma turned around and said with a straight face, "Go back and do your homework. If you make a mistake, I'll cut your pocket money in half." On the other side, Zheng Tan followed Xiaochu into the house. After entering the house, Zheng Tan felt a sense of familiarity at first glance. It was so King messy. It was just like himself in the past. The second time he saw a familiar creature. Zheng Tan saw 3 cockroaches as soon as she entered the room. One had just crawled into the bathroom, one had crawled out from under the cupboard, and it crawled back into the cupboard when it sensed the presence of someone. The third cockroach, which was the closest to Zheng Tan, paused when it saw her. It shook its long antennae and quickly crawled into a pile of magazines. Chapter 10. Xiaochu of course saw the cockroaches at the door. The moment he saw the cockroaches, he was actually imagining a magnificent scene of a black cat pouncing on the cockroaches. Unfortunately, the black cat in front of him only calmly glanced at it, then jumped onto a relatively clean chair and lay down with its eyes closed to rest. It didn't even look at the still warm taro ribs and sweet and sour pork on the dining table next to it. Xiaochu suddenly felt like he was choking. He then looked at Zheng Tan, who was lying on the chair with his eyes closed and didn't seem like he was going to move at all. He then looked at the food without a table cover. After thinking about it, he decided to ignore it. He turned off the lights in the living room and moved his feet into the room. After sitting down, Xiaochu opened a community forum and found a post that was posted a few days ago. He replied to a comment, Nonsense, my rats don't eat cockroaches, and the cats I found also ignore cockroaches when they see them. After discovering that there were rats at home and that the rat trap at home didn't work, Xiao Chu's first thought was to post on the internet for help. Buying rat traps and rat traps was a suggestion from a netizen. Under the post, there was a netizen who summarized the reason why rats became smart. Animals that experienced SARS had their IQ and vitality greatly improved. Those that didn't have IQ and vitality were all killed by humans during SARS. Therefore, after the rat traps and rat traps didn't work, under the premise of not buying rat poison, the most popular thing was to find a cat. Then there was Xiao Chu's action of going to the Jiao family to borrow a cat. Among the netizens who supported borrowing a cat, one of the netizens who showed off his pet cat left a comment saying, "Cats and rats are also the natural enemies of cockroaches. They also prey on cockroaches." Xiao Chu was now arguing with this person. Why don't you wait and see? If it doesn't even care about cockroaches, that cat definitely won't catch rats. Even if it wants to catch one, it might not be able to, the netizen said in the end. Let's wait and see. Comrade Xiao Chu typed loudly on the keyboard. The strength of his fingers was as if he wanted to poke the other party directly. While Xiao Chu was arguing with someone on the forum, Zheng Tan opened his eyes, bent his palm and silently looked at the sharp claws that peeked out from between his fingers. As for the first test of catching rats, he was not nervous at all. On the contrary, Zheng Tan was a little excited, but he did not know why. It was the same last night. He had killed several white mice in a row, but he didn't feel disgusted at all. Instead, an inexplicable sense of bloodthirsty excitement rose from the bottom of his heart, which was something he didn't usually feel. Perhaps it was because he didn't pay much attention to it, but what happened last night was like a fuse that ignited the bloodthirsty factor in his heart. However, this was probably due to the nature of the animal's body. Cats were the kind of animals that would hunt even if they were full. Hunting was almost in their nature. Even the most gentle-looking house cat had this nature. Just like a documentary that Jiao Yuan and the others watched a few days ago, every cat that is lazily lying by the stove after a full meal hides a tiger that is ready to pounce. Exhaling a long breath, Zheng Tan released his palms, closed his eyes and quietly laid there. However, his ears were propped up and from time to time, they would twitch because of some movement. However, because these sounds were not caused by the rats, Zheng Tan did not move. Time slowly passed and the night was getting darker. Zheng Tan did not find any movement from the rats, but there was the smell of rats around, which proved that the rats had come out not long ago. Zheng Tan was not in a hurry. He quietly waited in the dark, messy living room. With the light from the bedroom, Zheng Tan was able to see the entire living room clearly. Most of the people in the East Side family compound were asleep, and the surroundings were no longer noisy. The Jiao family must have gone to bed at this time as well. In the living room, other than Xiao Chu's typing and cursing, there was no other movement. Zheng Tan's ears twitched and he suddenly opened his eyes. In the dark, his dilated pupils were even larger due to the influence of his emotions. Zheng Tan silently jumped down from the chair. He crouched down, but his movement speed was not slow. Under the cover of the darkness, he stopped next to the pile of magazines. Zheng Tan's stealth skills were learned from the sheriff. In the bedroom, Xiao Chu, who had just finished a game, took off his headphones to stretch his sore neck. He turned his head and saw Zheng Tan quietly getting down from the chair. There's a chance. Xiao Chu hurriedly got up from the computer chair and took out his digital camera from the drawer. He paused for a moment before putting it down. He rummaged through the cabinet for a DV. After turning it on, he tiptoed out of the room. Unexpectedly, Xiao Chu's phone suddenly rang, scaring him. He quickly freed one hand to answer the call and spoke in a low voice. Zheng Tan waited in the dark. The mouse came out from the study and did not go to the kitchen. It was obvious that it was familiar with the environment and the living habits of the owner of the house. Xiao Chu basically did not cook for himself. He usually ordered takeout or ate in the cafeteria. The food was either in the bedroom or in the living room. Now the mouse was walking along the corner of the room. It walked for a while and then stopped to look out for danger. This mouse was about the same size as the lab rat Zheng Tan killed last night. However, in comparison, this mouse was hundreds of times more vigilant than the lab rat. When it was about to reach the bedroom door, the mouse's attention was more focused on the person in the bedroom who was talking on the phone. Just as the mouse was about to reach the door, Zheng Tan moved. The short distance was extremely fast. Like an arrow, it headed straight for the prey. When Zheng Tan rushed over, the mouse suddenly realized that there was a hunter lurking in the dark. It was a long way from here to the study to find a place to hide. If it turned around and ran, it would definitely be caught in a few steps. Therefore, the mouse's strategy was to directly rush into the bedroom. Xiao Chu's bedroom was slightly better than the living room, but it was still messy. However, for the mouse and cockroach there were many places to hide. As long as it entered the bedroom, Zheng Tan would not be able to do anything to it for the time being. However, it did not have the chance. A black hairy hand with sharp claws stepped on its tail. Before it could do anything, another hairy hand pressed down on its neck. The sound was so soft that people could not hear it at all. However, the rat instantly fell to the ground without even twitching. During the whole process, the mouse did not even have the time to squeak. Xiao Chu, who had just walked to the door, felt a black shadow flash under his feet. He looked down and saw a black cat. Under the black cat's claws was a motionless mouse. F***ck. Xiao Chu almost threw out the phone and DV in his hands. He looked at the cat, then looked at the mouse, and then looked at the DV in his hands that did not work at all. F***ck. Xiao Chu cursed again. That's it? Shouldn't it first chase around the house, then play with it in the palm of its hand when it caught up, and finally eat it when it was about to die? F***ck, I didn't even say a few words on the phone and it's over here? What was he trying to do with such a clean claw technique? This is absolutely crazy cool and domineering, isn't it? If anyone said that a cat that can't catch a cockroach can't catch a mouse, who would he get angry with? Hey Cricket, what's going on over there? The person on the other end of the phone felt that something was wrong with Xiao Chu and asked. Hey F***ck. Xiao Chu hung up the phone directly and turned on the living room light so that he could see more clearly. Xiao Chu took down the 2 chopsticks stuck in the unfinished lunchbox and poked the mouse. It did not move. Is it really dead? As if feeling that the chopsticks were not suitable for his hands, Xiao Chu threw them away, and ran to the kitchen to get the fire tongs that he had not used since he moved in. He held the mouse and swung it around as if to make sure that the mouse was really dead. He then used a digital camera to take photos from all angles, and then immediately returned to the computer. He stopped playing games and hurriedly posted the photos on the forum, vividly describing the scene just now. As a result, many people who replied to the post said that they did not believe it. A senior cat owner posted a few photos. In the photos, some of the mice were bitten full of holes, and some were only left with incomplete limbs and tails without a torso. Xiao Chu turned his head to look at the black cat in the living room that was stretching, but did not want to look at its prey at all, and continued to argue with the people in the forum. At this time the phone rang again. Xiao Chu held the phone with his shoulder and at the same time, typed quickly on the keyboard. Zheng Tan walked around the house and did not find the smell of other mice, so he did not wait there quietly. Just as he was about to go back to the chair and take a nap, Zheng Tan moved his ears, and he seemed to hear someone singing downstairs. Walking out of the room, Zheng Tan went to the balcony, filtered out the sound of Xiao Chu's phone call and typing and listened carefully. This time he heard it clearly. Last night's stars have fallen and disappeared into the distant Milky Way, Zheng Tan. The voice that was deliberately lowered but could not hide its special characteristics, the vibrato that was sung in order to express the emotions of the song, and the tune that was older than Zheng Tan. Chapter 11. Xiao Chu lived in a special apartment downstairs. Its uniqueness lay in the owner's pet, a rare species of blue-purple macaw. The bird was called General, and it was a tall, rich, and handsome parrot. This guy's value was comparable to a 100-square-meter house in the center of Chuhua City, and its value was still rising. It had a high IQ, was proficient in many languages, and had an eye-catching appearance. Coupled with the principle that rare things were valuable, it would be strange if this B***-starred bird's value was not high. Unlike most of the balconies in the apartment building, the balconies of the apartment on the 4th floor were all surrounded by thick barbed wire, mainly to prevent the bird from flying out. They were not afraid that it would fly away, but they were afraid that it would bully people and animals. This guy looked normal, but in fact it was full of evil tricks. General had a nickname, the Cat's Worry. This guy especially liked to bully cats and especially liked to bite their ears. It was said that several cats in the school had been bitten before. This was what Zheng Tan had heard from the Jiaopa when he first came to this place. The Jiaopa had warned Zheng Tan so that Zheng Tan would be more vigilant against fire, theft, and parrots. Looking at this guy's size and thinking about the strength of the maca's bite, one could imagine how destructive it could be when it was angry. However, after familiarizing himself with it, Zheng Tan knew that this bird actually bullied cats depending on who they were dealing with. The cats in the eastern residential area were fine. As long as they did not provoke it, it would not take the initiative to attack them. However, if it saw the cats in the western residential area, then sorry. Perhaps because of its owner's influence, this bird especially liked to sing nostalgic songs. Some songs Jing Tan had only heard in nostalgic documentaries, and some songs he had no impression of at all. However, listening to the tune he knew that it was from a certain era. For example, the song Jing Tan had just heard could be traced back to the 1980s, which was still good. What surprised Jing Tan the most was this bird's ability. If the average parrot's IQ was close to 4 or 5 years old, then the one downstairs was probably comparable to an adult, and it was a genius. Why did he say that? The birds downstairs were still singing in a low voice. Jing Tan could not help but look up at the starry sky helplessly and let out a long sigh. Then he scanned the balcony and found a metal mosquito coil. He pushed it to the railing, stretched out his claws and gently tapped it. Dang 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 dang, the singing downstairs stopped abruptly. The next moment, Jing Tan heard the sound of flapping wings and the clanging of toes hitting the barbed wire. Apparently, the bird did not expect to hear such a sound at this time, so it was very excited and ran to the barbed wire. Not long after, a pecking sound came from downstairs. It sounded like the bird was pecking at some food packaging. Beep 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 beep. You're here? No one would have thought that in the middle of the night, a cat on the 5th floor of Block B of the East Family compound of Tsinghua University was communicating with a parrot on the 4th floor using Morse code. In fact, Jing Tan was not proficient in Morse code. He had just learned it not long ago. The only one who could use it proficiently was De Pang, the seemingly insignificant dragonly cat. Every time De Pang went to visit relatives in the military region, or when the relatives in the military region came to visit the old lady, they would examine the use of cryptography such as Morse code communication, simple fence code card games, and so on. If De Pang's test results were not satisfactory, it would be better off squatting on instant noodles. This parrot was a loyal fan of cryptography. When De Pang was at home, it would go to De Pang with cards in its mouth to play fence code games. If it could not find De Pang, it would go to Jing Tan or its owner to play Morse code communication games. However, its owner was usually busy and did not have much time to play with it, so Jing Tan was often affected by disasters. Last week, General was taken to a nature reserve in another province to play. Jing Tan was very relaxed for a few days. Now that he found out that this guy was back, Jing Tan suddenly felt depressed. I heard that Huang was castrated? Today I saw that it was wearing an Elizabethan collar. General was still in the excitement of finding someone to chat with in the middle of the night, and had no sympathy for Huang. I haven't seen it for a few days. Jing Tan continued to knock on the mosquito coil plate. Alas, this is the fate of pet cats. It's really pitiful. In the future, the 4 swordsmen of the Eastern District will probably become the 4 eunuchs of the Eastern District. Not every pet cat would go through that surgery. Don't deceive yourself. *CK off, I don't want to talk to you. Don't go, let's talk. Aren't cats nocturnal animals? It's none of your business. I'm going to sleep. Alright, can't you sing something more fashionable? Half a minute later, there was a low singing voice downstairs again. You're like that fire. The burning flame warms me, Jing Tan. I want to pinch it to death. Ignoring the overly energetic bird, Jing Tan went back to the chair in the living room, covered its ears with its front paws and closed its eyes to sleep. Early the next morning, Xiao Chu was woken up by Jing Tan's loud cat howl. It struggled to get up, put on its SpongeBob SquarePants pajamas and opened the door to let Jing Tan out. In fact, Jing Tan could open the door himself, but this was not his home, so he needed to be more careful. Besides, Jing Tan wanted to give Xiao Chu some trouble and not let him sleep well. Xiao Chu yawned and forced herself to open the door. However, when she opened the door, she found that the Jiao family's door was open. Hearing the noise, the Jiao family, who were having breakfast, gathered around the door. Xiao Chu rubbed his eyes and smiled. Morning. Jing Tan went straight to the dining table, and the Jiaoma went into the kitchen to get breakfast for Jing Tan. Outside the door, Xiao Chu took out the rat from last night with a pair of tongs. The Jiaopa looked and commented, You used a little too much strength, but it's okay. Jing Tan pulled his ear, pretended not to hear, and continued to eat breakfast. The Jiaoma also gave Xiao Chu a bowl of vegetable porridge and asked him to eat with her. Anyway, with Xiao Chu's habits, it was impossible for him to buy breakfast or make breakfast himself at this time. At the dining table, Xiao Chu ate his porridge and talked about how he caught the rat last night. The Jiao family was excited, especially the Jiao Ma, who talked about it whenever she went out. At noon, Huang was brought over by its owner. It was no longer wearing the Elizabeth collar. After not seeing it for a few days, Huang seemed to have lost a lot of weight and looked listless. Ever since Jing Tan met it, he had never seen it like this. The Jiao Ma was chatting with Huang's owner. "Sister Ling, is Huang still recovering from the surgery?" The Jiao Ma was a little worried. "I don't think so. Other people's cats also had the same surgery, and they were full of energy the next day. However, after the surgery it did change a lot. It doesn't pee everywhere like it used to." Jing Tan walked into the Jiao Yuan's room and pulled out a large glass marble. Hearing the sound of the glass marble rolling, Huang's ears twitched and it looked over. Jing Tan thought that it would become dumb after the surgery. It was good that it was able to respond. He bent his foot and pulled the glass marble towards where Huang was lying. Huang, who was lying there listlessly, stretched out its paw and hooked the glass marble. 5 minutes later, Jing Tan looked at the energetic Huang playing with the glass marble in the living room and sighed. What the F***ck? It wasn't shocked, it was bored at home. In the end, under the Jiao Ma's suggestion, Huang was allowed to go out for a walk. After leaving the house, Huang returned to its previous energetic state. As soon as it walked out of the building, it ran and howled excitedly. Meow, meow, meow. On the 5th floor, the two women standing on the balcony were very confused. Didn't they say that cats that had undergone surgery wouldn't howl like that anymore? Based on his understanding of Huang, Jing Tan knew that this guy was just venting his frustration after being forced to stay at home with Elizabeth for a few days. At the same time, he was calling out to his other friends. That was all. When they walked to the corner, they met Grandma Zhai, who was on the same floor as Jing Tan and the other cats. Jing Tan and the other cats all knew her. "Huang!" Grandma Zhai called out. Hearing his name, Huang, who was howling with his tail up, suddenly stopped. He squinted his eyes and looked over. He replied delicately, "Meow." Jing Tan was speechless. This feeling was like seeing an auntie suddenly become a pretty girl from a humble family. There was a huge difference. They continued to trot along the familiar forest and came to the small forest next to the family area. Depang and Sheriff, who had been summoned by Huang's howl, were already there. Depang still looked sleepy with half-closed eyelids. As for Sheriff, he was chewing something in his mouth. It was probably some kind of insect. The 4 cats walked a little deeper into the forest. Jing Tan moved his ears. There seemed to be other people in the forest. He looked up and saw a touch of blue on a tree in front of him. It was General. The yellow crescent-shaped mouth of that guy always made Jing Tan feel that it was smiling slyly. Huang looked up and saw General. He opened his mouth. Meow. General, in the tree, heard the sound and looked at the 4 cats under the tree with his yellow eyes. He then raised his paw without an anklet to his mouth. Shoo. Jing Tan was speechless. Chapter 12. Jing Tan climbed up the tree and looked in the direction of the sound. Not long after, Jing Tan got a general idea of what was going on. It was similar to the 8 o'clock show that Jiaoma had watched some time ago. The only difference was that the woman didn't cry or make a scene. After watching for a while, Jing Tan got impatient. He went down the tree for a walk and let the bored parrot stay in the tree to watch the real 8 o'clock show. At least it wouldn't disturb Jing Tan. Jing Tan hoped that the 8 o'clock show would be released for a whole day or continuously. This idea was very immoral, but what was a moral thing? That thing had been kicked in the corner for as long as Jing Tan could remember. Occasionally he would pick it up and look at it. When it wasn't related to his own interests, that thing would stay in the corner and mold. Jing Tan wouldn't even look at it. Under the tree, Fatty was the only one lying there in a peasant's posture. His eyes were closed as if he was about to fall asleep. As for the Sheriff and Huang, they probably couldn't stay idle and went to find a place to play. In this area, there were only a few places that the cats often went to, so Jing Tan didn't have to worry about not being able to find the 2 cats. Even if he couldn't find them, they would answer if he called them. They wouldn't run far. He flicked his tail and tapped Depang, indicating that it should follow him. This guy looked like he didn't get enough sleep all day. At first, Jing Tan thought that it was because he overused his brain, but later he found that Depang still looked the same even if he didn't use his brain. However, who would have thought that such a sleepy-looking fat cat could use Morse code so skillfully? You can't judge a book by its cover, and the same goes for cats. Not far from the family compound, there was a small supermarket called Dongyuan Supermarket. Recently, Dongyuan Supermarket had been renovated. There was some sand piled up at the back door. Today the workers were off, so there weren't many people at the back door of the supermarket. When Zheng Tan arrived at the back door of Dongyuan's supermarket, he saw Huang squatting on the pile of sand. Its eyes were solemn and it was seriously going to the toilet. After it was done, it used its claws to dig up the sand and buried it. Then, it shook its fur and left as if nothing had happened. Huang did not pee everywhere after the surgery, but its nature was still there. It always liked to poop in some unexpected places. Zheng Tan imagined what kind of expression the workers would have if they came over tomorrow and found a pile of cat poop. Or maybe the workers didn't notice it and just brushed the pile of cat poop onto the wall. If Zheng Tan was the boss of this supermarket, he would definitely beat Huang to death. There was a big lawn in front of the Dongyuan supermarket. However, Zheng Tan and the others usually didn't go there because there were always a lot of people on the lawn. There were both adults and children there. They would only be looking for trouble if they went there. Children who didn't know any better were the natural enemies of all kinds of pets. You couldn't scratch your tail when it was caught. Children who made mistakes would be beaten by cats. Therefore, when Zheng Tan and the others came over, they would play in the small forest between the Dongyuan supermarket and the big lawn. Huang was scratching trees. After scratching one tree, it would go to the next one. The sheriff was looking for food, looking for some small insects to snack on. As for Depang, it curled up its forelegs and lay in the grass like a farmer. It didn't seem to be interested in what was happening around it. Zheng Tan looked around and didn't see anyone approaching. He jumped onto a stone table in the forest and squatted down to rest in the area where the sun shone. There was a faint scent of osmanthus in the wind. The hustle and bustle of the lawn didn't affect the small forest area. Occasionally, there would be the sound of the two cats flapping their wings and grinding their claws. The warm sunlight made Zheng Tan a little sleepy. Suddenly, there was a strange sound from the grass not far away. It sounded like a bird chirping, but it was different from a bird chirping. Zheng Tan had stayed in this area for so long, but he had never heard such a sound. Zheng Tan opened his eyes. In the place where the sound came from, Huang was raising one of its forelegs and twisting its neck left and right, as if it was considering where to start. The sheriff on the other side heard the sound and ran in that direction. The next moment, a furry ball ran out from there. A guinea pig? In the words of the locals, it was also called a Dutch pig. However, this one was a little different from a normal guinea pig. Its fur was longer, and there was a tuft of white hair on its head that fell forward like bangs, almost covering its eyes. Perhaps it was due to regular exercise, but this guinea pig was not as slow as the fat guinea pigs that Zheng Tan had seen in cages all day. Its running speed was much faster than before. However, even if it was faster than other guinea pigs, it still couldn't escape from the claws of the two energetic cats. The sheriff and Huang blocked the guinea pig in the middle. As long as the guinea pig tried to run out, they would use their claws to force it back to its original position. Zheng Tan thought about it and stopped the sheriff and Huang just as they were about to eat it. The guinea pigs in the school were all raised as pets. They weren't lab rats, so you couldn't play with them and eat them however you wanted. Moreover, this breed was a little special. Zheng Tan had just observed the guinea pig's fur. It was very clean and had probably been carefully combed. The breeder valued this guinea pig very much. No one could guarantee that there wouldn't be any traces left after eating it. If the breeder came to find them, it would definitely cause trouble. The lawn was nearby, so the guinea pig should have come from there. When Zheng Tan slapped Huang away, the guinea pig didn't immediately take the opportunity to run away. Instead, it stayed in place and looked at the cats vigilantly. Finally, as if it had made a decision, it moved little by little to Zheng Tan's side. Zheng Tan was speechless. Did it think that he wouldn't eat it? It had to be said that sometimes, animals' sixth sense was very accurate. Zheng Tan swung his tail and was about to move further away from the guinea pig when he saw a figure from the corner of his eye. A stranger's figure. If it was just a stranger, Zheng Tan wouldn't be so shocked. The reason why he was shocked was that he and the other three cats didn't notice that someone was approaching. He didn't even know how long this person had been there. Was he hiding nearby just now? Zheng Tan's gaze fell on the person's hand. The person's palm was facing inward, and his body was slightly covering his right hand. When their eyes met, Zheng Tan thought of the Jiaopa's gaze when he killed the lab rats that night. However, the Jiaopa only showed that kind of gaze to the lab rats. The man in front of him made Zheng Tan feel even colder. This person had killed more than just lab rats. Huang was only shocked by the sudden appearance of the person. Then he focused his attention on the fur ball that was hiding beside Zheng Tan. He raised his paw and tried, but he still didn't give up. Zheng Tan slapped Huang. Didn't this idiot see that there was a dangerous person here? Even when he was slapping Huang Zhengtan's gaze didn't leave the stranger. This person gave him a very dangerous feeling. He and the others were like the lab rats that were placed on the lab table that night. They couldn't escape and were waiting for their necks to be broken. Fatty was no longer lying on the grass. He sprang up with a whoosh, his back arched, his hair standing on end, his ears pulled back, and his eyes no longer had their usual sleepy look. Instead they revealed an ominous glint. His throat issued a warning, woo-woo, as if he was facing a formidable enemy. This was the first time that Jingtan saw Depang like this since he met him. Perhaps they were influenced by Jingtan and Depang, but the other two were also looking at the person with vigilance. Although they were a little stupid and careless, Huang and the sheriff didn't run away alone at the critical moment. How loyal. The sheriff was actually prepared to run away, but he realized that the other three didn't move. He also stayed there with his fur standing up. What should I do? Jingtan's mind was spinning. Running away immediately was one of the better methods, and it was also the most commonly used method. However, Jingtan wasn't sure if he could leave safely. Chapter 13. Because of the stranger's incident, Huang and the sheriff stayed at home for a few days. Fatty was still the same as before. He wouldn't come out unless he was called. As for Jingtan, he promised Xiaoguo to shoot a cat food commercial. He was taken by Jiaopa and Jiaoma to the Mingming Pet Center for 2 days. The first commercial was not the video commercial that Jingtan had imagined, but in the form of a photo story. Jingtan had neglected one thing before. At this time, the development of online videos was not as popular as it would be 10 years later. Many people were not optimistic about the development of online videos. They speculated that the future was not optimistic, and some people even said that it was hopeless. However, Xiaoguo did not think so. When he was discussing the contract with Jiaopa, he said, "The charm of the internet is that it can be magically reversed due to technological innovation." This sentence made Jingtan think more highly of him. As a person who had been there, Jingtan knew better than anyone else what the internet would be like 10 years later. Compared to other companies' single advertising pictures, Xiaoguo's own commercial in the form of a photo story was more attractive. Even people who did not have pets at home would like to watch it. At least it could increase the brand's popularity. With Jingtan, it did not take much effort to shoot such a story picture. They didn't even need to use cat food, which made Xiaoguo very happy. It was difficult to make a cat make an ideal expression. The limitations of the era made it so that businesses did not spend too much effort on this form of advertising. Xiaoguo would post such a photo story advertisement on a pet forum on the internet. At the same time, it would also be published in print magazines. This was another reason why Xiaoguo was so anxious to let Jingtan shoot the commercial. Some time ago, one of Xiaoguo's friends started a new pet magazine. It was published once a month, and Xiaoguo was happy to take this free ride. In fact, before Jingtan came to the pet center, Xiaoguo had tried to shoot other cats. Some of them were expensive breeds, but the shooting process and effect were really... It made his stomach hurt. However, after Jingtan came, the shooting went smoothly. Every movement and every look did not require much talking. Therefore, Xiaoguo's stomach did not hurt anymore. He also saved cat food. He quickly asked Jiaopa to sign the contract. Because Pet Magazine was a monthly magazine, Jingtan only needed to shoot it once a month. For Jingtan, shooting the commercial was not a big deal. In addition to making some extra money, Jingtan also had a playful attitude. The funniest thing was that at the end of the story picture, there was a small line of words, "Actor, Black Sea." It was Xiaoguo's habit to label the pet's name. The Black Sea was Jiaopa's idea. It did not directly use Jingtan's real cat name, which was also a kind of protection for Jingtan. As for the Black Sea, Xiaoguo also asked why. Jiaopa's explanation was that black was black, and sea represented carbon in the periodic table of elements. So, for the first time shooting a cat food commercial, Xiaoguo transferred 1,000 yuan to his card. Jiaoma said it was much more than expected. 1,000 yuan was really nothing for Jingtan in the past, but now it was a rare reward. Jiaopa also made a bank card for Jingtan. It was specially used for Jingtan to deposit advertising fees. In fact, it was not only Jingtan. Jiao Yuan and Gu Yuzi also had their own bank cards. They would deposit their New Year's money, exam rewards and pocket money. But now the cards were in Jiaopa's hands to prevent them from misusing them. This was Jiaopa's unique way of teaching. But what puzzled Jingtan was why Jiaopa would use this method on a cat. Sometimes Jing Tan did not understand what Associate Professor Jiao was thinking. But no matter what, after 3 months of working together, Jing Tan had a certain understanding of Jiao Pa. At least he was sure that Jiao Pa would not harm him. He did not know if it was because scientific researchers were particularly receptive to unusual things. If outsiders knew how Associate Professor Jiao got along with his cat, they would be so shocked that their eyeballs would pop out. Including Jiao Ma, Jiao Yuan, and Gu Yuzi, no one knew how Jing Tan interacted with Jiao Pa. After shooting the advertisement, Jing Tan did not have much to do. After staying at home for 2 days, he could not help but go out for a walk. This time he did not find anyone suspicious. He went to the lawn to observe again. He did not see the person from last time, but he saw the guinea pig. A little girl not much older than Gu Yuzi and her mother were watching the furry guinea pig walk on the lawn. Jing Tan decided to stay away from the mother and daughter in the future to avoid provoking that person again. One day Jing Tan came back from his walk. Before he entered the house, he sensed an unfamiliar presence. Yes? The atmosphere in the living room was not very good. It was too quiet. Jiao Ma was cooking in the kitchen, but she was also absent-minded. Jiao Pa and that person were sitting on the sofa and smoking. Neither of them spoke. The guest was about the same age as Jiao Pa. He did not seem to be in a good state of mind. His eyes were bloodshot and he looked like someone who had stayed up for a few nights. Jiao Pa called that person Yuanzi. It was obvious that they had a good relationship. However, Jing Tan did not understand why the two of them were so quiet and even a little depressed. Jiao Yuan had a small table in his room. When it was inconvenient for the two children to be around, Jiao Ma would bring out the small wooden table with the Chinese chess pattern so that Jiao Pa and Gu Yuzi could eat in the small room. Adult topics were not suitable for children to hear. Therefore Jing Tan was even more curious. What kind of topics were not suitable for children to be around? Jing Tan jumped on his own chair and lay down to rest. He also wanted to understand the situation. Jiao Pa only looked at Jing Tan and did not say anything. It was a silent consent. No matter how quiet he was before, after 3 glasses of wine, he opened his mouth. Through the two men's tearful conversation, Jing Tan had a rough understanding of the situation. Jiao Pa's master's supervisor, Professor Yuan, who was also Yuanzi's father, had stage 4 lung cancer. He was not in good health and only had 2 months left. When Jiao Pa graduated from the University of South China, Professor Yuan went abroad. Since Professor Yuan was not around, Jiao Pa did not stay at the University of South China. Instead he returned to his hometown Jinghan province to teach in Chuhua. The University of South China was the leader of the universities along the southern coast of China. It had the same status as Chuhua University in central China. Jiao Ma and Jiao Pa had a good relationship with Yuanzi when they were at the University of South China. Naturally, Yuanzi also had a good relationship with Professor Yuan. When they heard about Professor Yuan's death, both of them were very sad. Yuanzi did not inherit his father's legacy. He did not have the heart to do research. In other words, he did not have the heart to do research. Just like Jing Tan, he was a prodigal. Jing Tan did not know what Yuanzi had experienced after graduation. He also did not know how much Yuanzi had suffered because of his father's illness. Based on the conversation between the two, Yuanzi had changed a lot. Just like what Jiao Pa had said, a prodigal son has turned over a new leaf. It was said that a prodigal son who turned over a new leaf was more precious than gold. However, most of the time, a prodigal son would rather stay a prodigal son forever. This was because the price of turning over a new leaf was huge. He would rather not turn back in exchange for that price. So, if Fei Hang did not inform me that you came to Chuhua, you would have continued to carry on by yourself? You were going to hide it from everyone for the rest of your life. Jiao Pa's eyes were red. His voice was not loud, but it was trembling. It was obvious that he could no longer control his emotions. Jiao Ma did not say anything. She sat on the side and wiped her tears. The old man doesn't want too many people to know. He has stopped receiving all kinds of treatment. He just wants to close his eyes in peace at home, Yuanzi said as he sniffled. In the past, Jiao Pa was Professor Yuan's trump card. Back then, who in the University of South China's Life Sciences School did not envy Professor Yuan for having such a student? In addition to his son's inaction, Professor Yuan treated Jiao Pa like his own son. Jiao Pa's achievements today were all because of Professor Yuan's guidance. However, ever since Professor Yuan went abroad, the two of them only communicated through messaging apps or emails. It was not frequent. It seemed like Professor Yuan was always busy. Last week, Jiao received an email from Professor Yuan. He said that he would not be using a computer for a long time. Now, it seemed like Professor Yuan was really not going to tell anyone. After a moment of silence, Jiao calmed himself down and asked, "Why did you come to Chuhua this time?" Fei Hang said that you are here to investigate. Investigate what? If you need help, just ask. Yuanzi rubbed his face with his palms and said, I'm going to start a biotechnology company. It's not a small business. Father Jiao nodded. Chuhua City is indeed not bad. There are too many new companies along the southern coast, and companies established both domestically and abroad are rising one after another. Southern Genetics is entrenched in Pearl City in East China, and Huada Genetics is in Beijing. Various large bases have gradually formed interest groups. It's not impossible to get involved, but it will be very tiring. In comparison, Central China is much less competitive, and its development is much faster. Zheng Tan did not understand what the Jiao and Yuanzi were discussing. He did not know what the company was going to do. So, after listening for a while, he went to Jiao Yuan's room. A few days later, Zheng Tan was called to Jiao room. He was told that the Jiao family was going to the northeast. Professor Yuan's hometown was in the northeast. Zheng Tan could understand why the Jiao made this decision. But, this meant that he would be alone at home? The Jiao asked Zheng Tan for his opinion. If Zheng Tan wanted to go with them, the Jiao would borrow a car and drive to the northeast. This way it would be more convenient to bring Zheng Tan along. Zheng Tan thought for a while and shook his head. If they were going to the south, he would definitely follow them. He wanted to know if his other self was still alive. But this time they were going to the north. He did not want to go. Zheng Tan did not want to be sent to the pet center. He also did not want to stay at someone else's house. So the Jiao gave Zheng Tan a key. Before the family left, they took turns to remind Zheng Tan. The conclusion was, when you are alone at home, be good. Don't open the door for strangers. Zheng Tan. Did they really think that he was a child? The Jiao Yuan and Gu Yuzi left. They took out their snacks and piled them on the sofa. They were afraid that their cat would starve. After the Jiao family left, Zheng Tan looked at the empty house. He suddenly felt that the old house had become much bigger. This was so King boring. Zheng Tan rolled around the sofa in the living room. He then hung upside down on the edge of the sofa and looked at the upside-down view. Finally, Zheng Tan's gaze landed on the calendar in the living room. The Jiao said that they would be away for a week. Today was Wednesday. He had to wait until next Wednesday. Wednesday? Zheng Tan rolled over and stood up. Every Wednesday was the day that Dongyuan supermarket would deliver new goods. The delivery truck would arrive at 4 or 5 p.m. and leave at 6 or 7 p.m. It was 4:30 p.m. now. Zheng Tan put the key that the Jiao gave him around his neck and left the house. Chapter 14. When Zheng Tan went downstairs, he found a note on the corner of the stairs between the 5th floor and the 4th floor. Zheng Tan's eyes were on the same level as the note. Turn off the unnecessary power supply if you go on a long trip to avoid safety hazards. Close the doors and windows to prevent dust from blowing in. Remember to bring food. Please refer to the detailed instructions on the desk for the specific steps. It was the Jiaopa's handwriting. Zheng Tan tugged at her ears and turned around helplessly. With some difficulty, she used the key hanging around her neck to open the door. She entered the Jiao couple's bedroom and jumped onto the desk. Sure enough, there was an open notebook on the desk. Everything she needed to do was listed out in detail. Zheng Tan read it once, walked around the house, turned off part of the power supply according to the instructions, and closed the doors and windows. After everything was sorted out, Zheng Tan went out with a bag of thumb pancakes in his mouth. He swiped the access card and went to a sycamore tree next to the cement road in the East Side family compound. He climbed up the tree. There was a fist-sized hole on the 3rd branch. Zheng Tan put the key and access card in the hole, and then grabbed 2 leaves to cover the hole. Generally, there were few birds on the trees near the road in the East Side family compound, including the stupid parrot. As for the other cats, they rarely climbed trees here. If they did, they would climb the trees in the woods, not the cement road. Therefore, Zheng Tan was relieved to leave the things here. After all, he couldn't go on a long trip with the access card and house key marked as a pet. It would be too inconvenient. Besides, it would be even more troublesome if he was caught doing something bad. After putting the things away, Zheng Tan went to the bushes next to the East Garden supermarket and waited for the opportunity to get into the car. The delivery driver was helping to unload the goods. After the last box was loaded, the driver leaned against the door and smoked. He turned his head and saw Zhang Tan squatting in the bushes. Next to him was a bag of thumb pancakes that children often ate. "Yo, Black Charcoal, are you going out to play again today?" The delivery driver recognized Zhang Tan. He was very familiar with this scene. The only difference was that the cat was carrying a bag of biscuits. Was it preparing to go on a long trip? Previously, Zhang Tan had taken these two delivery trucks to slip away twice. At that time, the delivery driver had complained a bit. However, after the Jiaopa gave him 2 cartons of cigarettes and a bottle of liquor, the delivery driver would smile like a chrysanthemum every time he saw Zhang Tan. As long as Zhang Tan took the truck, it meant that he would receive more gifts in the future. The cigarettes and liquor were all good stuff. He obviously saw a lot, but his mind didn't think about anything. He was in a trance. The truck went from the city center to the 3rd ring road to the suburbs. The night was getting darker and the wind was getting colder. The truck suddenly stopped. Zhang Tan, who was in a daze, bumped his head into the truck's partition. Zhang Tan raised his paw and scratched the fur on his head. Listening to the conversation outside, Zhang Tan knew that the truck driver had arrived home. He got up and shook the dust off his body. He jumped out of the truck with the bag of thumb pancakes in his mouth. Looking around, Zhang Tan decided to find a place to sleep first. He would go out in the morning. Although he was now a cat, he still liked to walk during the day. When Zhang Tan was looking for a place to spend the night, the phone in a dormitory of a graduate student dormitory in Tsinghua University rang. The person closest to the phone picked it up and respectfully said a few words. Then he said, "Please wait for a moment. He should have finished his shower. I will go and call him." Then he put the phone on the table and went to the bed diagonally opposite. The person on the bed was sleeping soundly. She was grinding her teeth and laughing. The other 3 people in the dormitory were shocked at the beginning, but now they were numb. The person who just picked up the phone pushed the person on the bed who was grinding her teeth and whispered, "EXN, your boss is calling. I said you were taking a shower in the bathroom. Don't say the wrong thing later." Hearing the words, "your boss," the person who was sleeping soundly suddenly woke up. She quickly climbed out of bed and ran to the bathroom to clear her throat. The voice of someone who just woke up was a little hoarse. EXN didn't want her supervisor to know that she was sleeping at night. She didn't want her supervisor to know that she was sleeping at night. Wouldn't that ruin her image in her boss' mind? "Professor Jiao, I'm sorry. I was taking a shower. What can I do for you?" EXN picked up the phone. She felt that she was acting well. Her roommates who were playing games even stopped typing in order to cooperate with her. They even pretended to talk about why eating meat with garlic was nutritious. On the other end of the phone, Jiaopa paused for a second and said, "Sorry to disturb your sleep. EXN. What kind of F*King ears does Mr. Jiao have?" The resolution is F*King high. However, to EXIN's relief, Associate Professor Jiao didn't continue to dwell on this topic. Instead, he said, "Do you have time now?" "Yes," EXIN hurriedly expressed. Even if she didn't have time, she had to squeeze it out. 20 minutes later, EXIN stood in the living room of the Jiao family with the key she found in the drawer of Associate Professor Jiao's office. This was the second time that EXIN had come to the Jiao family. The first time was in the first half of this year, when the results of the postgraduate examination were announced. He was Associate Professor Jiao's first student. In addition, he was very capable, so Associate Professor Jiao attached great importance to him and invited him to have dinner with the Jiao family. EXIN had never seen Zhang Tan before. When Zhang Tan went to the Jiao family building, no one knew about it except for the Jiao family. Therefore, EXIN didn't know that her supervisor's cat was a little special. After looking around, EXIN didn't see the cat. She went to the bedroom and used the phone in the bedroom to call Associate Professor Jiao back. "Professor Jiao, I don't see the cat. Did your cat run away from home?" After saying that, EXIN wanted to slap herself. "That's what you get for saying that. Did you unplug the air conditioner?" Jiaopa asked on the other side of the phone. "Yes. The socket in the kitchen is also turned off," EXIN hurriedly said and described the situation in the house. "Professor Jiao, do you want me to buy a bag of cat food and put it here?" EXIN asked. "No, as long as there are snacks on the sofa and the fridge is full." EXIN was speechless. "How could you raise a cat like this? Come over every day and use my home phone to call me. As for your work summary, you don't have to report it this week." Hearing that she didn't need to report the progress of the experiment, EXIN was relieved. The experiment hadn't been going well these days, so there was nothing to report. Okay, don't worry. I'll come over every day at this time. On the train, Jiaopa put his phone back in his pocket and looked at the night outside the window. Chapter 15. Zheng Tan squatted on a tree. This was a suitable place that he had finally found. 200 meters away there were a few houses. 2 of them still had their lights on, and he could occasionally hear people talking. Most of the surrounding area was farmland, but Zheng Tan could see that there were not many crops in the fields with the help of the dim starlight. This area should be demolished soon. After changing into a comfortable position, Zheng Tan closed his eyes and listened carefully. He didn't dare to be too careless outside. The last bit of light went out and there were some cat calls in the distance. Sometimes there were 1 or 2 dog barks in the house. The temperature in the suburbs was a little lower than in Chuhua, and the wind made Zheng Tan feel a little cold. The hazy sleepiness was also being blown away by the gusts of wind. Just as Zheng Tan was wondering if he should find something to do, he heard some noise. It was the sound of footsteps. It was very light, but for a cat it was still clear. Zheng Tan peeked through the leaves and looked in the direction of the footsteps. A man in a loose sweater walked over with one hand in his pocket. The pocket seemed to be holding something, and the other hand was holding a small shovel. The person was wearing a hat, so Zheng Tan couldn't see the person's face, and he couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. But at this time, people who dared to come out alone were usually men, right? Looking at this posture. Was he going to kill someone and bury the body? Zheng Tan's curiosity was suddenly aroused, but he didn't dare to follow. Even if it was a cat, there was no telling if it would be killed. The direction that the person walked in was some dilapidated tile-roofed houses. It seemed that no one had lived there for a while and there were weeds everywhere. Seeing that the person stopped in front of a half-collapsed tile-roofed house, Zheng Tan was ready to squat there and watch the show. After all, it wasn't far. The person squatted in a corner, back facing Zheng Tan, and he didn't know what he was doing. Zheng Tan didn't hear the sound of bricks hitting each other, but there was a slight sound of glassware hitting each other. It wasn't until dawn that the man left the dilapidated house. Zheng Tan jumped down to take a look, but he didn't dare to get too close because he smelled an unpleasant smell. It was like pesticides. Zheng Tan was curious, but he cherished his life even more. Even if it was a cat's life, it was still his life. Taking advantage of the fact that the residents were still sleeping, Zheng Tan climbed into a house's yard and found a faucet to wash his feet so that they wouldn't stick to the soil from the dilapidated house. The water was too cold and there was no paper towel to wipe it off. Zheng Tan didn't want to lick the water himself, so he looked around and saw the clothes hanging outside the house. Only then did he wipe his claws on a long dress made of the best material. He stomped his feet on it, leaving a series of dust marks. After wiping his feet, Zheng Tan grabbed a persimmon from the persimmon tree in the courtyard, washed it and took it away. A few dog barks came from next door. The dog probably heard Zheng Tan's movements. The sound was a little tender, and it should be an underage puppy. When Zheng Tan returned to the tree, the sky was much brighter. Not long after, there were sounds of people cursing from the house. The reason was the skirt that Zheng Tan used to wipe his feet. As the sun rose, the temperature gradually rose. Zheng Tan felt the warmth of the sun on his body. He yawned, stretched, tore open the bag of thumb pancakes and began to eat breakfast. If it was too dry, he would gnaw on the persimmon. A brownish-gray puppy ran out of the house and played in the field. This should be the guy who barked a little earlier. There were a few hens pecking in the field that no one was managing. The puppy ran over and chased the hens away. One of the fat hens squatted down and didn't move when the puppy rushed over. After the puppy rushed over, it paused a little at the fat hen and took a few bites. It probably didn't even touch the hen's skin, so it continued to chase the other hens. The more it chased, the more it ran and the more it chased. Every time the fat hen saw the puppy chasing it, it squatted down and didn't move. Every time it could avoid being chased around. Sure enough, Depang's son also had great wisdom. The puppy was tired of chasing the hens, so it stuck out its tongue and jogged along the road by the field. Suddenly, its ears moved and it stopped to look around. It looked in Zheng Tan's direction and then ran over. Zheng Tan chewed on the thumb pancake and looked at the puppy that was barking and running around the tree under the tree. He threw down the thumb pancake that was only the length of a fingernail. The puppy paused, then walked over. It put its nose on the ground and sniffed around. It found the thumb pancake in the grass, rolled its tongue and ate it. After eating, the puppy looked at Zheng Tan on the tree who was eating the biscuits and wagged its tail happily. Every time, Zheng Tan would chomp down a thumb biscuit until there was only a small piece left before throwing it down. Then, she would watch as the little dog wagged its tail and searched for the biscuit in the bushes. Sometimes it would stand up and catch the biscuit in the air. Jingtan had a lot of fun. Unknowingly, the bag of thumb pancakes was almost empty. Just as he was about to sigh, he suddenly heard the sound of a lighter next to him. Jingtan was shocked. When did someone come nearby? Looking in the direction of the sound of the lighter, Jingtan saw a man dressed like a migrant worker. However, even if he changed his clothes, Jingtan still recognized him. It was the man who was looking for the Dutch pig. Chapter 16. Jingtan really didn't want to think about the process of riding the bicycle through the stone road. When they arrived at the destination that Celestine mentioned, Jingtan quickly jumped off the bicycle. He was so dizzy that he almost fell to the ground. This was a small two-story building surrounded by private residential areas. However, this area was also within the demolition area. Many of the houses were empty, and the word, demolition, was written on the wall. Tall advertising signs were hung around the building. As the high-tech zone expanded, this area was bound to be demolished. Within 10 years, this area would gradually be covered by new high-tech enterprises. Celestine opened the door and pushed the bicycle into the house. He rummaged through the fridge and took out a handful of beef cubes. He sat on the sofa and watched TV while eating, ignoring Jingtan. Jingtan looked around and jumped onto the coffee table. She took the beef cubes from Wei Ling's side and tore open the wrapping paper to eat. On the way here, Celestine said that he would ride directly to Tsinghua University and send Jingtan back. Therefore, Jingtan wasn't in a hurry to leave. He couldn't leave even if he wanted to. 10 minutes later, the door rang. A man in a police uniform came in. Seeing Jingtan, the man said to Celestine in surprise, "Where did you pick up this cat?" "I don't want to raise it. You know, I'd rather raise a dog than a cat." "You don't need to raise it. It belongs to someone else. I'll send it back tomorrow." Celestine opened a beef cube and threw it into his mouth. He took out the glass jar and handed it to the man. The man didn't say much. He put on gloves and took the glass jar to the bathroom. After a while he came out with a small bag. The bag was transparent and the things inside could be seen. Jade, diamond, gold ring. Although it was only a small bag, it was worth a lot. "Did you see the person?" the man asked. Celestine shook his head and pointed at Jingtan. "This cat found it. Tisk bullsh asterisk t." The man obviously didn't believe him. He turned around and said, "Tell me, what else did you find? I didn't hear you clearly on the phone. You should change your PHS. Otherwise, you won't be able to contact anyone once you leave the central district." Celestine explained the situation of the dilapidated tile-roofed house. "I deliberately sprinkled some medicine around it to prevent some livestock from getting close, but it won't let the weeds die. The residents nearby had been busy moving away recently, so they didn't even look at the rundown houses overgrown with weeds. The bag was hidden very well and the surrounding traces were cleaned up quite well. They were very careful. It's not the first time that person has done something like this. Of course it's not the first time. That person has taken several lives, so he's very familiar with this kind of thing. Only you can find it." "Are all black cats like that?" "No, my aunt's cat is also a black cat. It likes to be spoiled, not like this one." Jingtan listened to the discussion of the female students behind him. He pulled his ears. He was in a bad mood. Rolling around? Spoiled? *ck them. He had to admit that when Jingtan climbed over the wall of the east gate, his heart suddenly calmed down a lot. Maybe this was called a sense of belonging? Before Jingtan finished his thoughts, a dog barked, which made Jingtan's calm heart turn gloomy. Jingtan recognized this dog barking. It had been a month since he heard it. The compound had been relatively peaceful for a month. Jingtan looked sideways. A dog was running towards him with a bottle of mineral water in its mouth. Its owner was chasing after it. This dog was called Sahara. It had nothing to do with the famous desert. The name came from its bloodline. It was said that this guy had 3 bloodlines: Samoyed, Husky, and Labrador. Sahara's face had the serious expression of a husky, but it also had the upturned mouth of a Samoyed. The combination of these two looked wretched. It inherited the cleverness of a Labrador, but this cleverness was not always on point. For example, now, Sahara was running around with a bottle of mineral water that its owner had just bought. It probably liked being chased. Whoosh! The plastic bottle of mineral water was bitten by Sahara's fangs. The water inside sprayed out due to the water pressure. It sprayed out when Sahara ran past Jing Tan. Jing Tan did not have time to dodge and was hit. Could it be that his reaction was really bad? The culprit had run away with the leaking bottle. Jing Tan shook the water off his body. Before he could sigh, he heard the sound of wings flapping. On the wall of the compound behind him, a blue figure landed. Yesterday I passed by your door. You were splashing water with a bucket. You splashed it on my shoes. Pedestrians on the road, laugh, laugh. Jing Tan. Chapter 19. In the morning EXN was woken up by the alarm clock. They had a report in the morning, and he needed to prepare the slides an hour in advance. Even if he had to stay up late, he still had to get up. Jing Tan and EXN went out together. EXN ran to the East Garden cafeteria and bought 2 steamed buns. She thought about it and then bought 2 cups of soy milk. She took them to the small woods in the courtyard, where Jing Tan was squatting on the stone table, waiting. EXN put a bag of steamed buns and a cup of soy milk on the stone table. He didn't know if cats could drink soy milk, but when he called Mr. Jiao said that his cat had a strong stomach, unlike other cats. EXN thought that he would choke if he only ate steamed buns, so he bought an extra cup of soy milk. It wasn't until he inserted a straw into the disposable cup of soy milk that EXN suddenly realized that cats probably didn't know how to use straws. While EXN was worrying, Jing Tan had already eaten a steamed bun. He pushed EXN's hand away, bit the straw, and sucked. EXN was stunned. If it weren't for the fact that he was in a hurry to attend the report, he would have squatted here to study how Mr. Jiao's cat used a straw. How could it use a straw with its 2 leaky mouths? Jing Tan was not in the mood to care about what EXN was thinking. He was very hungry now. He had to finish eating quickly and then go for a run. If he didn't eat, he wouldn't have the strength to run at all. There were 8 steamed buns in the bag. When Jing Tan ate the 6th one, Huang and the sheriff ran over and gave the remaining 2 to them. As for De Pang, even if it came, it would be the same as Jing Tan. It basically didn't eat other people's leftovers. As usual, when Huang came over, it would bark twice to show that it was here and ask the others to come over quickly. After that, it would start scratching the tree. Jing Tan threw the plastic bag containing the steamed buns and the cup of soy milk into the dustbin next to him. He walked around the stone table twice to help with digestion. When De Pang slowly walked over, Huang had already started scratching the 3rd tree. Jing Tan felt that it was about time. He called out and walked out of the forest. Huang stopped grinding his claws and eagerly followed. He ran 2 steps and nibbled on the grass beside him. Originally, Jing Tan thought that if he did not run into Celestine, he would run on his own. Wasn't it just a run? Besides, there were still 3 cats here. Later he would call them and run together. Before Jing Tan left the East Garden, he saw Celestine doing pull-ups at the public exercise equipment next to the lawn. Seeing Celestine, Huang had the biggest reaction this time. This guy arched his back and jumped up like a flea. His hair stood on end, and his ears were stretched into the shape of an airplane. In comparison, De Pang was much calmer than last time. This meant that Jiaopa was not in a good mood. People always felt dissatisfaction, depression, and other negative emotions. However, there were different ways to vent them. Some people like to swear, some like to drink, and some like to fight or do some strenuous exercise. However, Jing Tan had never heard of Jiaopa swearing or doing strenuous exercise to vent. Because he had children at home, he rarely smoked or drank. He only drank when some of his close friends came over. Unlike other people, Jiaopa would read Mr. Zhou's anthology whenever he was in a bad mood and couldn't find a solution. Jing Tan remembered that the most recent time, which was in August, was when Jiaopa was waiting for the National Natural Science Foundation to release the results. At that time, Jing Tan had seen Jiaopa holding Mr. Zhou's anthology and reading The True Story of IQ. Fortunately, when the National Natural Science Foundation released the results a few days later, Jiaopa's name was on the list. As for today, Jing Tan jumped on his desk and took a look. Jiaopa was reading Mother******** today. After all, times were moving forward, and they couldn't go back to the Mother***** era. After much consideration, coupled with the deep cultural heritage and long history, they finally found a word that was more elegant than F****, more civilized than F****, and more enjoyable than F****, F****. Mother**** was said out loud. Reading this paragraph, Jing Tan glanced at Father Jiao, who was reading a book seriously, and tugged at his ear. Okay, everyone had different ways of venting their frustrations. Lu Zhou didn't understand Jiaopa's way of thinking. Jing Tan jumped off his desk and went to the balcony to get some fresh air. The night air was cool and there was a faint floral scent. Before Jing Tan could take a deep breath, he heard a unique singing voice coming from the 4th floor. I planted a melon under the wall, I water it every day it sprouted, it bloomed, a big watermelon, I can't hold it, Jing Tan. Hold your grandma's paw. The parrot was watering the melon with a small watering can in its mouth. When it was eating watermelon in the summer, it spat out some watermelon seeds in the flower pot on the balcony. It accidentally found a melon sprout, and it was so happy that it sang, "Plant a melon," every time it watered the melon. Strangely, the melon sprout survived. Sometimes the parrot and its owner would go on business trips for a few weeks. No one watered the melon, and it was completely up to fate. If it rained, the melon sprout would not be watered. As for fertilizing, there was a lot of bird droppings, so there was no need to worry. Jing Tan looked over there. The melon sprout had grown a lot, but he did not know how long the poor melon sprout would last. Chapter 23. Jing Tan squatted in front of the door and scratched the door impatiently. Of course, it wasn't scratching the door of the Jiao family, but the door of Chu Xiangyang's house across the street. It scratched the wooden door through the metal grating. Chu Xiangyang was playing games with his headphones on, so he didn't hear it. By the time he realized what was going on, the door of his house was already scratched. Jing Tan waited for nearly an hour before EXN came back, sweating profusely. EXN was busy with an experiment when he received a call from Mr. Jiao. Mr. Jiao told him to pick up the cat after he finished his work. EXN already had the experience of taking care of a cat for Mr. Jiao, so he knew that Mr. Jiao's cat had a bad temper. After he finished his work, he didn't even have time to drink water. He threw down his lab coat, grabbed a water bottle, and rode a second-hand bicycle he just bought to Dongfang family compound. When he reached the 5th floor of the Jiao family's house, EXN was not surprised to see the murderous black cat, and the sound of its claws scratching the wooden door. Looking at the wooden door and the black cat's eyes, EXN hurriedly explained why he was late. He emphasized that it was because Mr. Jiao had agreed to it. Jing Tan didn't listen to his nonsense. He ran back to the living room and threw out the bag that Jiaopa took him to the biology building. EXN wasn't too surprised by Jing Tan's behavior. He was already surprised when he took care of a cat for the first time. Following Mr. Jiao's instructions, EXN opened the bag. Jing Tan jumped in automatically, stared at EXN and signaled EXN to hurry up. Not being able to speak was an inconvenience. In the past, Jing Tan did not think much of being deaf and mute. Now Jing Tan could empathize with them. After all, not everyone in life could have a telepathic connection with you. EXN did not understand the look in Jing Tan's eyes. He just followed Mr. Jiao's instructions and ran downstairs with the bag. When he got downstairs, he suddenly remembered that he could actually let the cat go downstairs by herself. Exin and Zheng Tan rode to the affiliated hospital of Tsinghua University. Unfortunately, even riding a bike could cause problems. Not far from the East family compound, Zheng Tan heard a click, and then the bicycle slowed down. Hearing Exin scolding, Zheng Tan, who was squatting on top of the bag in the basket, looked down and found nothing unusual. However, when he looked back, he saw a broken chain lying on the road. Zheng Tan, what kind of broken car is this? The chain actually broke. He still had to wait for a while for the school bus. Moreover, the bus was constantly stopping, so Zheng Tan couldn't wait any longer. What kind of soldier is this? Who knew when a taxi would arrive on campus? Borrow a car? Who could he borrow a car from? If EXN borrowed another car with a broken chain, Zheng Tan would probably be depressed to death. Zheng Tan remembered that when he went downstairs, he saw the Jiaopa's small electric bike in the shed. Recently, when the weather was cold, the Jiaopa would occasionally run to the biology building when it had time. EXN was scratching her ears and cheeks, not knowing what to do. Then she saw the black cat, which was squatting in the basket, jump off and run back. Hey, why are you running? Wait. EXN was even more anxious. If the car was gone, he could buy another one. If the cat was gone, he would be too ashamed to meet his boss. Therefore, EXN left the car on the side of the road and chased after the cat. Anyway, the car was secondhand and not worth much. Besides, it was a car with a broken chain in broad daylight. Except for the sanitation workers, no one would touch it. Zheng Tan rushed back to the Jiao family compound. He found another key for the small electric bike in a small corner of the Jiaopa's desk drawer. When he went downstairs with the key in his mouth, he saw EXN, who was panting. Zheng Tan glanced at EXN, ran to the Jiaopa's small electric bike, patted the seat and put the key down. EXN. Well, the boss's cat was indeed different. The small electric bike was much more reliable than the bicycle. EXN could also drive it easily. It was good that he didn't need to pedal himself. He really didn't have much strength to pedal on the bicycle. What made Zheng Tan unhappy was that the small electric bike was always slow and couldn't be compared to the bicycle. Therefore, at this time, Zheng Tan really hoped that the Jiao family could have a small car of their own. On the way to the hospital, Zheng Tan kept paying attention to the road. After memorizing it, he didn't need to rely on others for help in the future. It would save him time and effort. The affiliated hospital of Tsinghua University was not located on the campus of Tsinghua University. It was about 2 stops away from the campus. The hospital integrated medical treatment, teaching, and scientific research. It was a level 3 first-class hospital. There were always a lot of people in the hospital. EXIN parked the car and went in with the bag according to the detailed address given by Mr. Jiao. After all, the hospital was not a place where cats could walk around freely. Zheng Tan couldn't just walk in. When he was in the elevator, he bumped into the Jiaopa, who was coming down to buy lunch. Zheng Tan saw that the Jiaopa looked fine. When he talked to EXIN, he didn't sound as hoarse and depressed as before on the phone. It seemed that the Jiaoma should be fine. The Jiaopa bought 5 lunch boxes and gave one to EXIN. EXIN was going to buy some fruits, but when she touched her trouser pocket, she didn't bring any money. She left in a hurry and didn't wear a jacket. Her wallet was in her jacket. They thought that they had been discovered and were a little nervous. Although there were no signs on the bus that said pets were not allowed, most people were against bringing pets on the bus. Fortunately, no one else had noticed Zheng Tan's beard. The lighting in the bus was not good and people who had just gotten off work were resting, so no one had noticed. The child's mother also thought that her child had seen a black cat hanging on someone else's school bag, so she smiled and comforted him. After arriving at the Dongyuan bus stop, the 2 children quickly got off the bus, afraid that they would be discovered. After all, they were children and were not as thick-skinned as adults. After entering the east gate, Zheng Tan jumped out of his school bag and breathed in the fresh air. His whole body felt much more relaxed. At this time, the sky was already dark and the street lights were on. He could vaguely hear the ending song of the program on the school radio. Gusts of wind blew, and the rustling of leaves could be heard. There were also sounds of leaves falling. Zheng Tan shivered. He ran a few steps and climbed up a tree. After sliding down, he felt that his body was warmer. Seeing Jing Tan like this, Jiao Yuan and Gu Yuzi, who had been in a heavy mood, also felt a little relieved. There were people walking around and people driving home after work. It was not very quiet. They could also hear the barking of dogs in the Dongyuan bus stop. After arriving at the front of the building, Jiao Yuan swiped the access card, and Jing Tan ran in first. The building of the Dongyuan bus stop was older and did not have voice-activated lights. The people who lived here were used to it. The lights on the lower 3 floors were all on, but the 4th and 5th floors were dark. The parrot's home on the 4th floor was empty, probably on a business trip again. On the 5th floor, Chu Xiangyang rarely came downstairs, so no one turned on the lights. Zheng Tan went up to turn on the lights so that the 2 children would not bump into the staircase. For other people it was dark in the corridor without lights, but for Zheng Tan it was nothing. Or rather, for a cat, this kind of darkness was nothing. It jumped up and turned on the light switch for the 4th floor, and then went up to turn on the light switch for the 5th floor. After turning on the lights, Zheng Tan ran downstairs. The 2 children had just reached the 2nd floor. When they reached the 4th floor, the 2 children finally knew why their cat had run up in advance. Before they entered the building, they did not see the lights on in the corridor between the 4th and 5th floors. Black charcoal is so smart. Jiao Yuan laughed. This was the first time he had laughed since he found out that Jiao Ma was in trouble. Yes. Gu Yuzi was as quiet as always. Jing Tan was depressed. What was there to praise about this kind of thing? Chapter 25. Previously, there were people who suspected that the burglars from the residential area were part of a gang. Even though Jing Tan was not that good at analyzing cases, she knew that to steal from the residential area, there was a high chance that there was an inside job. However, when the police came, they couldn't find anything. In the end, the case was left unsettled. Therefore, during that period of time, the owners who rented out their houses were forced to come back to the residential area to explain to the other residents. They even had to sign an agreement to ensure that the tenants trusted them enough. Jing Tan heard a ding sound. It was the sound of the building's security guard. These 2 people had access cards, and they were familiar enough with the residents of this building. Their target should not be the old residents of the few retired old employees. In fact, many of the retired teachers living here lived a very poor life. Even if they were actually very rich, when they went to the school cafeteria, they would buy a large bag of white steamed buns and cook some porridge and side dishes at home. They did not live a life of luxury. Besides, if the target was the family of those retired teachers, why wait until now? Therefore, excluding the old residents, the relatively new residents were the 2 families on the 5th floor. Coincidentally, why did they choose today when Jiao Ma was in trouble and Jiao Pa wasn't home? Only 2 children who were still in elementary school were left. They weren't much of a threat and didn't have the ability to fight back. After one of them entered the building, Zheng Tan estimated the time and went to the door from the balcony. He looked at the clock on the wall. It was 10 minutes past 2. Generally speaking, people were sleeping soundly at this time. If their target wasn't the Jiao family, Zheng Tan wouldn't do anything for the time being. He didn't want to wake up the 2 children who had just fallen asleep. To be honest, Zheng Tan didn't care about what happened to the others. People were biased. What did it have to do with him if someone else's house was stolen? These people were only stealing, not murdering people. Of course, even if he did make a move, he would wait until they were ready to leave. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Zheng Tan didn't want to make a scene in front of his house. However, things didn't go as planned. The man paused when he reached the 5th floor. He seemed to be making sure that all the residents on the 5th floor were asleep. Then he walked towards the Jiao family. Soon there was a soft sound from the door lock. Hearing the light footsteps outside the door, Zheng Tan's ears twitched, and the claws on its palms stretched out. The person on the other side of the door would never have thought that 1 meter away from the door, a black cat was sitting at the dark entrance. With the sound of footsteps approaching and the sound of the door lock, the black cat had already changed its posture. It bent its legs and crouched down. The tip of its tail, which had been wagging from time to time, stopped moving. It was ready to strike. The door gradually opened after a light click sound. An unfamiliar aura. The person at the door carefully pushed open the door, but just as he pushed it open a little before he could even step in, he suddenly felt a sharp pain on his face. From the tip of his left eyebrow to the right corner of his mouth, a few bloody marks immediately appeared on his face, each of which immediately oozed blood. Before the man could react to the sudden pain, a strong force hit his chest, causing him to take 2 steps back and fall to the ground. The lights in the corridor were all turned off, and the small flashlight in the man's hand fell to the ground due to the impact. The man panicked, thinking that he had been discovered. What he knew was not true. It was obvious that there were more than 2 children in the house. The man screamed because of the sharp pain on his face. He got up and ran downstairs, but the small amount of light from the flashlight was not enough for him to see the stairs clearly. Blood had already flowed into his eyes, blurring his vision. The pain on his face stimulated the nerves in his brain, and he staggered and rolled down the stairs. When he reached the corner of the stairs, he hurriedly got up and ran down again. Jing Tan closed the door and chased after the man. Since the man had already come all the way here, Jing Tan would not be satisfied if he didn't get rid of him once and for all. The man should be very familiar with the stairs of the residential building. Otherwise, how could he run so fast in the dark and hurt his eyes? When he reached the first floor, there was a person lying in front of the door. It was a woman. Depang's owner, the old lady who was almost 70 years old, was standing there with a stun baton. Depang squatted by the old lady's feet. Depang's warning was not for Jing Tan, but for the old lady. The old lady was very sensitive to the sound of wooden signs, so she made the wind chime sound like a wooden sign. Although the old lady was old, she was not careless at all when she made a move. Otherwise, the young woman would not have been lying there without a sound. The young woman's accomplice had no intention of helping his companion at this time, and directly rushed out. The old lady had already caught one, so she did not stop the man. After all, she was old and could not compare to a strong young man. If she forced herself to fight, she would definitely be at a disadvantage. Therefore, the old lady shouted forcefully, "Catch the thief!" Then in the courtyard, the dogs began to bark, mixed with a few cat meows that Jing Tan was familiar with. Jing Tan chased after the man.